can't pay you today," she whispered, clutching her sick child, but the single dad doctor treated her anyway. And years later, the same woman walked back through his hospital doors, owning everything he'd almost lost. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Noah's shoulders sagged as he leaned back in his worn office chair, the leather cracking beneath him. The clock on the wall showed 9:45 p.m., marking the end of another marathon shift at Maple Hollow Community Hospital. The small stack of unpaid invoices on his desk seemed to mock him in the dim light of his desk lamp. He rubbed his tired eyes and picked up the first bill. The amount due made his stomach clench. Medical supplies weren't getting any cheaper, and their suppliers were becoming less patient about late payments. The hospital's aging equipment needed constant repairs, eating away at their already thin budget. "Just one more," he muttered, reaching for his lukewarm coffee. The ceramic mug bore a faded, hash-owned dad message that Sarah had painted years ago. The sight of it brought a small smile to his face, despite his exhaustion. A knock on his office door made him look up. "Come in." Nancy, the night shift nurse who'd been at Maple Hollow even longer than him, poked her head in. Her gray hair was pulled back in its usual neat bun. "Heading home soon, Dr. Whitaker? You've been here since dawn." "Just finishing up some paperwork," he said, trying to hide the bills under a patient folder. But Nancy's sharp eyes didn't miss much. She stepped into the office, her comfortable shoes squeaking slightly on the linoleum floor. "Those from Davidson Medical Supply?" Noah nodded, too tired to pretend otherwise. "They're threatening to put us on credit hold if we don't clear our balance by the end of the month." "Lord have mercy," Nancy sighed, settling into the chair across from his desk. "What are we going to do?" "Keep going as long as we can," Noah said firmly, though his voice carried a weight of uncertainty. "This hospital is too important to this community, Mrs. Peterson had her baby here last week. Where would she have gone if we weren't here? The nearest hospital is 40 miles away." Nancy's face softened with concern. "You can't keep carrying all this on your shoulders alone, Noah. When was the last time you took a day off?" He waved off her worry. "I'm fine. Besides, we're short-staffed as it is." He glanced at the stack of patient files waiting for his review. "Did Mr. Jenkins' test results come back?" "Don't change the subject," Nancy scolded gently. "You're no good to anyone if you work yourself into the ground. Sarah needs her father healthy." The mention of his daughter made Noah's chest tighten. Sarah had her violin recital coming up next week, another evening he might have to miss if the staffing shortage continued. He'd already missed 2 of her performances this month. Speaking of Sarah, Nancy continued, "Isn't it past time you headed home? That girl's probably waiting up for you again." Noah checked his watch and grimaced. She was right. He started gathering the invoices, tucking them into his briefcase. Some problems would have to wait until tomorrow. The drive home was quiet, with only the hum of his old sedan's engine and the occasional flicker of streetlights to keep him company. The small town of Maple Hollow was mostly dark at this hour, save for the glow of porch lights and the neon sign of Pete's Diner, still serving the night shift workers and truckers passing through. As he pulled into his driveway, Noah noticed Sarah's bedroom light was still on. His heart sank a little. She should have been asleep by now. The sound of a violin floated through the evening air as he approached the front door, a haunting melody that spoke of both determination and longing. Inside, he hung his coat and followed the music upstairs. Sarah's door was partially open, and he paused to watch his daughter play. Her eyes were closed in concentration, her fingers moving precisely across the strings. At 16, she looked more like her mother every day. The same dark curls, the same quiet grace. The music stopped abruptly as Sarah noticed him. "Dad, you're finally home." She carefully placed her violin in its case before giving him a tight hug. "You should be in bed, sweetheart," he said, though he couldn't help but smile as he hugged her back. "I needed to practice," she explained, pulling away to show him a stack of sheet music on her desk. "The scholarship audition is in 2 months, and this piece still isn't perfect." Noah sat on the edge of her bed, noticing the dark circles under her eyes that matched his own. "It sounded perfect to me." "That's because you have to say that. You're my dad." She sat next to him, leaning her head on his shoulder. "How was work?" "Same as always," he said lightly, not wanting to burden her with the hospital's troubles. "But let's not talk about that. Tell me about your day instead." Sarah yawned, unable to hide her fatigue. "Mrs. Reynolds says I'm making good progress with the new piece, and I aced my history test. That's my girl." Noah pulled back her covers. "Now, time for bed. You have school tomorrow." Sarah climbed under the blankets but caught his hand before he could stand. "Dad, Is everything okay? You look worried." Noah's heart ached at the concern in her voice. She was too young to worry about adult problems, yet too perceptive to fool completely. He forced a reassuring smile. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. Just tired from a long day. Are you sure? Because I heard Mrs. Miller at the grocery store talking about the hospital having money problems and—" "Hey," Noah interrupted gently, smoothing her hair back from her forehead. "Don't you worry about any of that. Everything will be okay. You just focus on your music and your studies." Sarah studied his face for a moment, then nodded, slowly. "Promise? Promise." He leaned down to kiss her forehead, just like he had every night since she was small. "Sweet dreams, Sarah." "Night, Dad. Love you. Love you too." As Noah turned out her light and closed her door, he felt the weight of his promise settle heavily on his shoulders. He didn't know how he would keep the hospital running, or how he would manage to pay for Sarah's college if she didn't get the scholarship. But standing there in the darkened hallway, listening to his daughter's breathing, even out into sleep, he knew he would find a way. He had to. For now, though, he would carry these burdens alone. Sarah deserved to hold on to her dreams without the weight of adult worries. Even if it meant more sleepless nights for him, he would make sure she had the chance to pursue her passion, just as her mother would have wanted. The first delicate flakes of snow drifted past the hospital windows like tiny white feathers caught in a gentle dance. Illuminated by the pale golden light of early morning, Dr. Noah Whitaker pressed his forehead against the cold glass, his warm skin meeting the icy surface as he watched the sprawling parking lot below slowly disappear beneath an ever-thickening white blanket. His breath fogged the window in small, rhythmic puffs as he sighed deeply, each exhalation creating cloudy patches that reminded him of the growing storm clouds of problems facing Maple Hollow Community Hospital. The emergency room waiting area, which on a normal Tuesday morning would be bustling with the familiar chaos of patients, family members, and staff moving about their daily routines, now sat eerily quiet and still. The rows of plastic chairs stood empty like silent sentinels, their blue surfaces reflecting the harsh fluorescent lighting overhead. 3 of their most reliable nurses had called in during the early morning hours. Their aging cars simply couldn't handle the rapidly deteriorating road conditions that had transformed the usually manageable country roads into treacherous sheets of ice and snow. The cafeteria staff was running on a skeleton crew of just 2 people, trying to keep hot coffee brewing and simple meals available for whoever managed to make it through the storm. The maintenance team, typically a group of 5 dedicated workers, now consisted of just old Joe Morrison, a weathered man in his 70s who had walked 2 grueling miles through the deepening snow to make it in, his worn work boots leaving a trail of wet footprints through the hospital corridors. Noah's measured footsteps echoed through the empty hallway as he made his morning rounds, the sound bouncing off the beige walls and creating an almost haunting rhythm in the unusual silence. The fluorescent lights hummed their familiar tune overhead, casting harsh, unforgiving shadows in the corners where the morning cleaning hadn't yet reached. Motivational posters hung slightly askew on the walls, healing hearts, helping hands, and compassion in action, their bright colors seeming almost too cheerful for the somber atmosphere that had settled over the building like a heavy blanket. In the small break room that served as a refuge for exhausted staff, he found Linda Martinez, their most experienced nurse and the unofficial backbone of the emergency department. She was brewing a fresh pot of coffee, her movements efficient despite the obvious weight of concern etched across her weathered features. Linda had been at Maple Hollow for nearly 20 years, and Noah had learned to read the subtle signs of stress in her normally steady demeanor. "Morning, Dr. Whitaker," she said, her voice carrying the familiar rasp of someone who had already been awake for hours, tinged with the shared concern that seemed to hang in the air between them like an unspoken understanding. "Thompson and Martinez both called out about an hour ago. Road conditions are getting worse by the minute. It's just you, me, and Williams covering the ER today." She paused, glancing toward the window where the snow continued its relentless descent. "Williams is barely out of nursing school, and she's never worked a storm like this." Noah ran a hand through his graying hair, feeling the familiar texture of stress and exhaustion that had become his constant companion. The silver threads at his temples caught the harsh lighting, a reminder of the years of responsibility that weighed on his shoulders. "We'll make it work, Linda. We always do." His voice carried the quiet confidence of a man who had weathered many storms, both literal and metaphorical, though the slight tremor in his words betrayed his own growing concern. She handed him a steaming cup of coffee and a chipped ceramic mug that read, "World's Greatest Dad," a gift from Sarah years ago that he kept in his office. He wrapped his fingers around it gratefully, feeling the blessed warmth seep into his tired hands, providing a small but precious comfort against the persistent chill that seemed to permeate the building's aging walls and old bones. Throughout the long morning hours that stretched like taffy, they handled what patients they could manage with their reduced staff. A middle-aged construction worker with a sprained ankle who had slipped on his icy front steps. A 7-year-old girl with a case of strep throat whose worried mother had braved the storm. An elderly gentleman named Harold with chest pain that turned out to be severe indigestion from his wife's experimental chili recipe. Noah found himself doing the work of 3 people, taking vital signs with practiced efficiency, updating patient charts in his careful handwriting, even grabbing a mop to clean up a spill of apple juice in room 3 when Joe was busy upstairs attempting to fix a broken heating unit that had chosen the worst possible day to malfunction. By early afternoon, when the weak winter sun should have been at its highest point, the snow had intensified dramatically. Through every window in the hospital, the world outside had transformed into a swirling white void that seemed to erase all familiar landmarks. The wind howled around the building's corners with increasing ferocity, rattling the old windows in their frames, and the ancient pipes groaned and creaked in protest against the penetrating cold that seeped through every crack and crevice. "Dr. Whitaker!" Linda called from the nurse's station, her voice cutting through the unusual quiet with an urgency that made Noah's stomach clench. The Weather Service just issued a severe winter storm warning. They're advising everyone to stay off the roads until further notice. Some areas are reporting whiteout conditions. Noah nodded grimly, his mind immediately drifting to Sarah, safe and warm in their small house on Elm Street. She would be home from school by now, having caught the early dismissal bus that the district had wisely arranged. In his mind's eye, he could see her in the living room, her violin case open beside her as she practiced the complicated piece she'd been working on for her upcoming audition, Pachelbel's Canon, her mother's favorite. He pulled out his phone with hands that trembled slightly from fatigue and sent her a quick text. "Storm getting worse. Plenty of food in the fridge. Stay warm and safe. Love you more than music." The afternoon crawled by with agonizing slowness, each minute feeling like an hour in the oppressive quiet of the nearly empty hospital. Noah caught himself dozing in the small doctor's lounge between the handful of patients who braved the storm, his untouched coffee growing cold beside him on the scratched table, his dreams filled with memories of warmer days and easier times. The skeleton crew moved through their duties like weary ghosts, their footsteps muffled by the constant whisper of snow against windows and the occasional groan of the building settling under the weight of accumulating ice. At exactly 4:30, according to the large clock that dominated the waiting room wall, the automatic doors of the emergency room whispered open with their familiar mechanical sigh, letting in a violent blast of icy air and a swirling tornado of snowflakes that scattered across the floor like confetti. A young woman stumbled through the threshold, her slight frame battling against the wind, clutching a small bundle wrapped in what appeared to be a worn blue blanket that had seen better days. Her thin denim jacket, clearly inadequate for such weather, offered little protection against the merciless storm, and melting snow dripped steadily from her dark hair onto her trembling shoulders, creating small puddles on the floor beneath her feet. Noah rushed forward from behind the reception desk as the woman's legs seemed to give way beneath her, exhaustion and cold taking their toll. He guided her gently to the nearest chair, his hands steady and sure, immediately noticing how she held the precious bundle protectively against her chest, with the fierce desperation of a mother protecting her most treasured possession. As she shifted slightly, trying to find her balance, a small face emerged from the folds of the blanket, a toddler with cherubic features, his olive skin flushed with the telltale signs of fever, dark curls plastered to his forehead with sweat despite the cold that clung to his mother's clothes. "Please," the woman whispered, her voice trembling like a leaf in the wind, each word carrying the weight of desperation and bone-deep exhaustion. Her eyes, dark brown and rimmed with unshed tears, met Noah's with a mixture of hope and shame that he recognized from years of treating people who had nowhere else to turn. "I didn't know where else to go. He's been burning up all day, and nothing's helping. I've tried everything. Cool baths, fever medicine, wet cloths. Nothing works." Noah crouched down to her level, bringing himself to eye level with both mother and child, keeping his voice gentle and reassuring in the way that had comforted countless worried parents over the years. "You came to the right place. You did exactly what any good mother would do. I'm Dr. Whitaker. Can you tell me your name?" "Jade," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking louder might somehow make her situation more real or more shameful. "Jade Freeman, and this is Tommy." Her hands shook visibly as she tried to unwrap the blanket with trembling fingers, revealing a little boy whose cheeks burned with fever despite his obvious exhaustion. "He's 2.5. He was fine yesterday, just fine, and then this morning." Noah could immediately see the fever's angry flush painting the child's round cheeks, could hear the slight wheeze in his breathing that spoke of respiratory distress, could feel the heat radiating from his small body even from a distance. Every instinct honed by years of practice told him this child needed immediate attention. He reached out with practiced gentleness to touch Tommy's forehead, feeling the alarming heat that radiated from his skin like warmth from a furnace. "Let's get him checked out right away," Noah said, already rising to call Linda over from the nurse's station where she was organizing medical supplies. But before he could turn away, before he could take even a single step, Jade's cold hand caught his sleeve with surprising strength. He looked down to see tears welling in her dark eyes, threatening to spill over like a dam about to burst. "Dr. Whitaker," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, each word seeming to cost her tremendous effort. The harsh fluorescent lights cast deep shadows under her eyes, highlighting the exhaustion and worry etched into every line of her young face like a map of recent struggles. She swallowed hard, her throat working visibly as she seemed to gather what little strength and courage she had left. "I can't pay you today. I don't have insurance, and I don't have any money. I spent my last $20 on medicine that didn't work, and Her voice broke, the words catching in her throat like thorns. The examination room felt too bright and too sterile to Jade Freeman as she sat perched on the edge of a chair, her arms wrapped protectively around her small son. The boy's cheeks burned red with fever, while his little chest rose and fell with labored breaths. Her own hands trembled slightly as she smoothed back his damp hair. Dr. Whitaker's gentle movements as he prepared his stethoscope seemed carefully measured, as if he were trying not to startle a frightened animal. "I'm going to listen to Tommy's breathing now," he said softly, his voice warm and reassuring. "It might feel a little cold." Jade nodded, though she didn't loosen her grip on Tommy. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her coat hung loose on her thin frame. When she shifted in her seat, she couldn't hide a slight wince. "How long has he had the fever, Doctor?" Whitaker asked, placing the stethoscope against Tommy's back. 3 days, Jade whispered, her voice barely audible. "I tried giving him children's Tylenol, but it wasn't helping anymore." She swallowed hard. "I know I should have brought him in sooner, but—" Her voice trailed off, and she stared at the floor. "Doctor?" Whitaker noticed how she pulled her sleeves down to cover her wrists, the way she angled herself away from direct eye contact. The bruise peeking out from her collar told a story she wasn't ready to share. "You're here now," he said kindly. "That's what matters." As he examined Tommy, Noah kept his movements slow and predictable. The little boy had an ear infection and the beginnings of bronchitis. Nothing antibiotics couldn't fix, but concerning enough in a child so young. What worried him more was the mother. Her hollowed cheeks and defensive posture spoke of someone running on empty, in more ways than one. "Tommy needs antibiotics," he explained, writing on his prescription pad. "And I'd like to give him something for the fever now." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "I'd also like to check you over, if that's okay." Jade's head snapped up, fear flashing in her eyes. "I'm fine," she said quickly. Too quickly. "It's just Tommy who's sick." Noah pulled up a rolling stool and sat down, making sure to keep some distance between them. "I understand you're worried about the cost," he said gently. "But right now, I'm more concerned about making sure both you and Tommy are okay." Tears welled up in Jade's eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. "I can't." She started, then stopped, taking a shaky breath. "We don't have insurance. I can't pay for any of this." "Let me worry about that," Noah said firmly. He'd seen that look before, the mixture of desperation and shame that came with having to choose between medical care and basic necessities. "Right now, you both need help, and that's what matters." While they waited for the nurse to bring Tommy's medication, Noah noticed how Jade's hands shook as she filled out the paperwork. The pen scratched against paper as she carefully wrote down their information, pausing occasionally as if weighing how much to reveal. After examining Jade, finding bruised ribs and signs of malnutrition that made his jaw clench, Noah stepped out to make some notes in their chart. Through the window, he could see the snow falling harder now, the parking lot almost invisible under the thick white blanket. The thought of them leaving in this weather, especially given their condition, made his stomach twist. When he returned to the exam room, Jade was gathering their things, Tommy half asleep against her shoulder. The antibiotics had already helped bring down his fever, but both mother and child looked exhausted. "The storm's getting worse," Noah said, gesturing toward the window. "The roads aren't safe." He hesitated for a moment, then continued. "We have an on-call guest suite that's not being used. It has a bed, a small bathroom, and it's warm. I'd feel better if you and Tommy stayed there tonight." Jade froze, her hand clutching the strap of her worn backpack. We couldn't," she stammered. "Please," Noah said quietly. "It's no trouble. And Tommy needs rest to recover." He kept his tone casual, trying not to spook her. "There's even a small kitchen down the hall where you can make tea." She stood there for a long moment, conflict clear on her face. Finally, she looked down at Tommy's sleeping form and nodded slightly. "Just for tonight," she whispered. "If you're sure it's okay." "I'm sure," Noah said, relief flooding through him. He picked up their chart, gesturing toward the door. "Let me show you where it is." As they walked down the quiet hallway, Jade clutching Tommy close, Noah could see her shoulders gradually relaxing, just a fraction. Sometimes, he thought, the hardest part of healing was accepting help in the first place. The guest suite was small but clean, with a double bed covered in fresh linens and a window that looked out over the snow-covered grounds. "The bathroom's through there," he said, pointing to a door, "and there are extra blankets in the closet." Jade stood in the middle of the room, looking lost and overwhelmed. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know why you're being so kind to us." "Because everyone deserves kindness," Noah replied simply. "Try to get some rest. I'll check on Tommy in the morning." He placed a card on the small table by the bed. "If you need anything during the night, just call the nurse's station. The number's right there." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "You're safe here," he added quietly, meeting her eyes for a moment before stepping out into the hallway. As the door clicked shut behind him, Jade Freeman sank down onto the edge of the bed, still cradling her sleeping son. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to breathe, fully, deeply, the weight of constant fear lifting just enough to let exhaustion take its place. She brushed a gentle kiss against Tommy's forehead, no longer burning with fever, and whispered, "Maybe things will be okay." The words felt foreign in her mouth, like a language she'd forgotten how to speak. But as the snow fell silently outside their window, creating a soft white curtain between them and the rest of the world, she let herself believe it. Just for tonight. The staff lounge was quiet, except for the gentle hum of the vending machine and the soft clink of plastic utensils. Noah watched as Jade carefully helped her toddler son take small bites of the warm soup he'd managed to find in the hospital cafeteria's evening leftovers. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the spoon, but her movements were gentle, patient. "Is it okay?" Noah asked, keeping his voice soft and calm. He'd noticed how Jade startled at sudden noises. She nodded, not meeting his eyes. "It's perfect. Thank you." Her voice was barely above a whisper, but the gratitude in it was unmistakable. The door to the lounge squeaked open, and Sarah poked her head in. She'd stayed late after her violin practice to help with filing, something she often did when Noah worked evening shifts. "Dad? Oh, hi there." Her face brightened at the sight of the little boy. The toddler, who had been quiet until now, gave a shy wave. His fever had come down with the medicine, and some color had returned to his cheeks. "This is my daughter, Sarah," Noah explained. "Sarah, this is Jade and her son." Sarah smiled warmly and sat down at the table, maintaining a respectful distance. From her backpack, she pulled out a small stuffed penguin, well-loved but clean. "I noticed your little guy earlier. I thought he might like this." She held out the toy. "His name is Waddles. I used to take him everywhere when I was small." Jade's eyes widened, and she looked from Sarah to the penguin, then to her son, who was reaching for it with curious hands. "Oh, we couldn't. That's too much. Please," Sarah insisted gently. "I'd really like him to have it. Waddles is really good at making people feel better." The little boy hugged the penguin to his chest, and for the first time, a tiny smile appeared on his face. Jade's eyes filled with tears, though she quickly blinked them away. Noah noticed how she pulled her sleeve down to cover her wrist, where fading bruises peeked out. "Thank you," Jade whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She cleared her throat and focused on helping her son finish his soup. Noah caught Sarah's eye and gave her a proud smile. His daughter had always had an innate kindness that reminded him so much of her mother. She'd grown into such a thoughtful young woman, despite all they'd been through. "Would you like some more?" Noah offered, gesturing to Jade's half-empty bowl. He'd noticed how she'd been making sure her son ate first, taking only small bites herself. She shook her head quickly. "No, this is more than enough. You've already done so much." Sarah stood up, understanding in her eyes. "I should head home and finish my homework. It was really nice to meet you both." She touched her father's shoulder as she passed. "Don't work too late, Dad." After Sarah left, silence settled over the lounge again. The little boy was getting sleepy, his head nodding as he clutched the penguin. Jade gathered him close, and Noah could see the fierce protection in her embrace. "The guest suite is just down this hall," Noah said, standing slowly to avoid startling them. "It's not fancy, but it's warm and safe. There are clean linens in the closet, and the bathroom has some basic toiletries." Jade stood, lifting her son with careful movements that suggested hidden injuries. "I don't know how to repay you for all this." "You don't need to," Noah replied firmly, but kindly. "Everyone deserves help when they need it." He led them to the suite, a simple room with 2 beds and a small attached bathroom. It was meant for visiting doctors or families of critical patients, but it had been empty for months due to budget cuts. "If you need anything during the night, press this call button," he explained, pointing to the wall. "I'll be here until morning." Jade nodded, her eyes taking in the room as if memorizing an escape route. Noah recognized the look he'd seen it before in others, running from something or someone. "Good night," he said softly, turning to leave. At the doorway, he paused. "Jade, you're safe here, I promise." She didn't respond, but he saw her shoulders relax slightly as she sat on the bed, her son already asleep in her arms. The next morning, Noah finished his rounds early and headed to the guest suite to check on them. The hallway was quiet, the morning sun casting long shadows through the windows. As he approached the door, he noticed a piece of paper on the floor. Bending down, he picked up the carefully folded note. The handwriting was neat but hurried. "Thank you. Someday I'll return the kindness." Noah opened the door to find the room empty. The beds were neatly made, and Waddles the penguin sat in the center of one pillow. Everything was exactly as it had been, except for their absence. He looked down at the note again, running his thumb over the words. In his 20 years of practicing medicine, he'd learned that sometimes the biggest impact came not from the medicine prescribed, but from the dignity preserved. He tucked the note into his pocket, hoping wherever Jade and her son were heading, they would find the safety they deserved. The morning sun glinted off patches of melting snow, casting bright reflections through the hospital's conference room windows. Dr. Noah Whitaker sat at the long oak table, his coffee growing cold as he listened to Board Chairman Peterson's droning voice detail the hospital's financial woes. "The numbers don't lie, ladies and gentlemen," Peterson said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "We're hemorrhaging money. The guest wing alone costs us thousands in utilities and maintenance each month, and it sits empty most of the time." Noah's fingers tightened around his paper coffee cup. He could feel the other board members' eyes on him, knew they were thinking about his decision to house Jade and her son there just days ago. The pressure in the room was palpable. With all due respect, Noah spoke up, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "That wing serves a vital purpose in our community. Sometimes people need more than just medical care. They need a safe place to rest and recover." Dr. Roberts, a senior surgeon with salt and pepper hair, cleared his throat. "Noah, we appreciate your compassion, but this is a hospital, not a shelter. We can't afford to be both." "Can we afford not to be?" Noah countered, spreading his hands on the table. "How many of our patients need follow-up care but can't get it because they have nowhere safe to stay? How many leave too early and end up back in the ER with complications?" Chairman Peterson's mouth tightened into a thin line. "Dr. Whitaker, your recent guest is exactly the kind of liability we're talking about. No insurance, no payment, and now we hear she's disappeared without a trace. That's not healthcare, that's enabling." The words stung, but Noah kept his face neutral. That woman and her child needed help. "Would you have preferred I turned them away in a snowstorm?" "We would prefer you followed proper protocols," Dr. Mitchell chimed in, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her tablet. "The liability alone. The liability of letting a sick child and his mother freeze?" Noah interrupted, then took a deep breath to calm himself. "Look, I understand the financial pressures we're under, but closing the guest wing won't solve our problems. It's a Band-Aid on a bullet wound." The room fell silent. Noah could see some board members shifting uncomfortably in their chairs, while others stared stonily ahead. He knew he was fighting an uphill battle, but he couldn't stay quiet. What if we looked at other solutions? He suggested. We could partner with local businesses for sponsorship of the wing or apply for community grants. There are options we haven't explored. Chairman Peterson sighed heavily. We'll take your suggestions under advisement, Dr. Whitaker, but for now, we need to focus on concrete cost-cutting measures. The guest wing will remain under review. The meeting adjourned shortly after, and Noah gathered his things, his shoulders heavy with the weight of what felt like inevitable defeat. As he walked down the hallway, Dr. Roberts caught up with him. Noah, the older doctor said quietly, you're a good man, but you can't save everyone. Noah managed a small smile. Maybe not, but I have to try. The rest of his shift passed in a blur of patients and paperwork. By early evening, his stomach growling and his head aching, Noah decided to stop at Mary's Diner for a quick bite before heading home. The bell above the door chimed as he entered the familiar establishment. The smell of coffee and grilled onions filled the air, and the usual crowd of locals occupied their regular spots. Noah slid into a booth near the window, away from the counter where several residents were engaged in animated conversation. Did you hear about that woman? A voice carried across the diner. The one with the little boy? Betty at the grocery store said she saw them walking down Main Street in the middle of the night. Noah's hand paused as he reached for the menu, his ears picking up the conversation despite himself. I heard she was running from something, another voice added. Or someone, probably trouble, if you ask me. Well, I heard she stayed at the hospital without paying, a third voice chimed in. Taking advantage of our tax dollars, no doubt. The waitress, Jenny, approached Noah's table with a sympathetic smile. She'd worked at the diner for years and knew him well. The usual, Dr. Whitaker? Thanks, Jenny. He nodded, trying to ignore the continuing conversation behind him. Probably one of those drug addicts, someone said loudly. They come through town all the time, looking for handouts. Noah's jaw clenched. He turned slightly in his seat, speaking just loud enough to be heard. Or maybe she was just a mother trying to protect her child. Sometimes people need help, not judgment. The gossips fell silent, recognizing his voice. Noah turned back to his coffee, which Jenny had quietly placed in front of him. When his burger arrived, he ate quickly, the food tasting like cardboard in his mouth. As he approached the counter to pay, he pulled out his wallet, knowing exactly what was left inside, just enough to cover the meal and a small tip. Jenny rang up his order, and he counted out the bills carefully, leaving her the last few dollars as a tip. Take care, Dr. Whitaker, Jenny said softly, giving him a knowing look. Noah nodded, zipping up his coat against the chill outside. The snow had mostly melted, leaving puddles that reflected the streetlights like mirrors. As he stepped out into the evening air, he couldn't help but wonder where Jade and her son were now, hoping they had found somewhere safe and warm. The diner's bell chimed behind him as he left, leaving behind the whispers and judgments, but carrying with him the weight of all the Jades in the world who needed someone to stand up for them, even in their absence. The evening sky painted streaks of purple and orange across Maple Hollow as Noah's old station wagon rumbled into their driveway. The modest two-story house, with its weathered blue paint and crooked mailbox, stood as a testament to better days. Sarah burst through the front door before Noah could even turn off the engine, waving an envelope in her hand. Dad, it came! Sarah's voice trembled with excitement, her long brown hair dancing in the chilly breeze. The letter from Chicago's Young Musicians Foundation. Noah's exhaustion melted away at the sight of his daughter's radiant smile. He climbed out of the car, his joints creaking from another long day at the hospital. Well, don't keep your old man in suspense. Inside their warm kitchen, Sarah's hand shook as she carefully opened the cream-colored envelope. The walls around them held photos of her past recitals, each one marking another milestone in her journey with the violin. A few featured her mother, Emma, beaming proudly beside her daughter, memories from what felt like a lifetime ago. Dear Miss Whitaker, Sarah read aloud, her voice growing stronger with each word. We are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as one of 10 finalists for the Chicago Young Musicians Excellence Scholarship. Noah's heart swelled with pride as Sarah's eyes grew wide, scanning the rest of the letter. He moved closer, wrapping an arm around her shoulders as she continued, reading. The final round of auditions will be held at the Preston School of Music in Chicago on March 15th. Sarah's voice faltered slightly. All finalists must perform in person to be considered for the full scholarship. Noah squeezed her shoulder gently. This is incredible, sweetheart. You've worked so hard for this. Sarah clutched the letter to her chest, tears of joy glistening in her eyes. Mom would be so happy, wouldn't she? She'd be over the moon, Noah said softly, feeling Emma's absence more keenly in this moment of celebration. She always said you had magic in your fingers. Sarah hurried to the living room where her violin case sat in its usual spot next to the old upright piano. She pulled out her violin, the same one Emma had played as a girl, and began to play. The sweet notes of Beethoven's Romance in F filled their home, each phrase carrying years of dedication and dreams. Noah leaned against the doorframe, watching his daughter lose herself in the music. Her face showed the same serene concentration he'd seen countless times on Emma's face. The melody soared and dipped, speaking of hope and possibility, while Noah's mind began calculating numbers he knew wouldn't add up. After Sarah finished playing, she carefully packed away her violin. I should probably start practicing more. The letter says we need to prepare 3 pieces. Her excitement bubbled over again. Can you believe it, Dad? Chicago. I'm so proud of you, Sarah, Noah said, managing to keep his voice steady. This calls for a celebration. How about I make your favorite pasta? While Sarah went upstairs to call her best friend with the news, Noah moved through the kitchen on autopilot, pulling out ingredients. His hands worked mechanically, chopping vegetables and boiling water, but his mind was racing. Chicago meant airfare, hotel stays, meals. The scholarship would cover tuition if she won, but getting there. During dinner, Sarah chatted animatedly about the pieces she might play, her eyes bright with excitement. Noah listened, offering encouraging words and genuine smiles, all while the weight in his chest grew heavier. I was thinking, Sarah said between bites, maybe we could visit the Art Institute while we're there? Mom always talked about seeing the Impressionist collection. Noah nodded, his throat tight. That sounds wonderful, honey. We'll see what we can do. After Sarah went to bed, still floating on cloud 9, Noah sat at the kitchen table with his laptop and a stack of bills. The harsh glare of the screen illuminated his tired face as he opened his banking app. The numbers stared back at him, unforgiving. Mortgage payment due next week, electric bill past due, credit card maxed out from covering hospital supplies he couldn't bear to cut. He pulled up flight prices to Chicago, his heart sinking further. Even the cheapest tickets would strain his budget past breaking point. Hotel rates in the city made him wince. Noah ran his hands through his graying hair, the pride of earlier giving way to a familiar, helpless frustration. His eyes drifted to Emma's photo on the wall, her last Christmas with them, her smile radiant despite the illness that would take her just months later. I promised you I'd give her every opportunity, he whispered to the photograph. I don't know how, Emma, but I'll find a way. Noah opened his checkbook, the pages reflecting months of careful juggling between bills and necessities. He began to write numbers in the margins, searching for any expenses he could cut, any assets he could sell. The old watch his father had given him. Maybe the piano, though the thought of selling it made his chest ache. It had been Emma's pride and joy. The kitchen clock ticked steadily toward midnight as Noah continued to pore over the bills, searching for a solution that seemed just out of reach. Sarah's violin music from earlier still echoed in his mind, a bittersweet reminder of all that was at stake. Noah's footsteps echoed through the empty hospital corridor as he made his way to the conference room. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the worn linoleum floors. A week had passed since Sarah's scholarship letter arrived, and the weight of their financial situation pressed heavier on his shoulders with each passing day. Outside the conference room's frosted glass doors, he paused to straighten his wrinkled tie. The early morning hours spent treating a bus accident victim had left little time for appearances. Through the glass, he could make out the silhouettes of board members already seated around the long table. Dr. Whitaker, Margaret Chen, the board secretary, nodded as he entered. Please take a seat. The room felt unusually tense. Board members sat rigid in their chairs, shuffling papers and avoiding eye contact. Richard Blackwood, the board chairman, stood at the head of the table, his expression unreadable behind wire-rimmed glasses. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, Blackwood began, clearing his throat. As you're aware, Maple Hollow Community Hospital has been facing significant financial challenges. Today's meeting concerns the future of this institution. Noah's stomach tightened. He'd known this day was coming, but the reality of it still felt like a physical blow. After extensive negotiations, Blackwood continued, I'm announcing that Maple Hollow Community Hospital has been purchased by an anonymous investor. A collective gasp filled the room. Noah's hands gripped the armrests of his chair. Around him, board members erupted into whispered conversations. Order, please. Blackwood raised his voice slightly. The deal was finalized yesterday afternoon. The investor has chosen to remain anonymous for now, but has appointed new management to oversee the transition. Dr. Helen Martinez, head of pediatrics, spoke up. What does this mean for our staff, our patients? The hospital will remain operational, Blackwood replied, but there will be changes. A corporate efficiency expert will be reviewing all departments and personnel in the coming weeks. Noah felt the eyes of several board members turn toward him. His reputation for treating patients regardless of their ability to pay was well known and not always appreciated by the board's more business-minded members. We've been assured, Blackwood continued, that the hospital's mission to serve the community will continue. However, certain protocols and policies will need to be standardized to ensure financial sustainability. The meeting dragged on for another hour as Blackwood outlined preliminary changes. New accounting systems, updated billing procedures, stricter admission policies. Each announcement felt like another brick being added to the wall between care and compassion. As the meeting drew to a close, Noah gathered his papers slowly, his mind racing. The hospital had been his home for over 15 years. He'd treated generations of families here, delivered babies who were now in high school, helped elderly patients pass with dignity. Dr. Whitaker? Noah looked up to find Margaret Chin standing beside him, her face etched with concern. The new management team would like to see you in your office. The walk to his office felt longer than usual. The morning light filtered through the windows, catching dust motes in its beam. A few nurses smiled sympathetically as he passed. News traveled fast in small hospitals. His office door was open when he arrived. Inside, two unfamiliar figures in expensive suits stood examining his wall of thank you cards and children's drawings. Dr. Whitaker, the taller of the two, stepped forward, extending his hand. I'm James Morton, representing the new ownership. This is Miss Patricia Walsh, our efficiency expert. Noah shook their hands, noting their firm, impersonal grips. Please, have a seat. Morton gestured to Noah's own chair behind his desk. The irony wasn't lost on him. Dr. Whitaker, Walsh began, her voice clipped and professional. We've been reviewing the hospital's records, including individual physician performances and practices. She opened a leather portfolio, though Noah suspected she hardly needed to reference its contents. Your medical expertise is impressive, but your billing practices are concerning. The number of reduced fee and pro bono cases you've taken on has contributed significantly to the hospital's financial strain. Those people needed help, Noah said quietly but firmly. Many couldn't afford. We understand your humanitarian intentions, Morton cut in smoothly. However, this is a business. Moving forward, all physicians will need to adhere to strict billing protocols. Walsh closed her portfolio with a snap. Given your history and the challenges you might face adapting to our new policies, your position is under review, effective immediately. The words hung in the air like smoke. Noah stood slowly and walked to the window. Outside, snow had begun to fall again, the flakes drifting lazily past the glass. The same window where he'd watched countless sunrises during overnight shifts, where he'd stood contemplating difficult cases, where he'd sometimes just paused to gather strength before delivering hard news to waiting families. His reflection stared back at him, superimposed over the falling snow. A man who had always believed that doing the right thing would somehow be enough. Now he stood there, stunned, watching white flakes settle on the window ledge, each one adding to the weight of uncertainty pressing down on his shoulders. The snow continued to fall silently outside, indifferent to the moment when one man's world shifted beneath his feet. The morning sun streamed through the hospital windows, casting long shadows across the freshly waxed floors. Noah noticed the difference immediately. The cleaning crew had doubled in size overnight, and the usual scent of antiseptic was mixed with fresh paint from somewhere in the building. Did you see the new equipment arriving this morning? Whispered Julie, one of the veteran nurses, as Noah checked patient charts at the nursing station. Brand new MRI machine, top of the line, cost more than my house. Noah nodded, trying to focus on his paperwork. The past few days had been surreal. Construction crews came and went, taking measurements and making marks on walls. Business people in expensive suits walked through the halls, speaking in hushed tones and taking notes on tablets. Any word on who's behind all this? He asked, keeping his voice low. Julie shook her head. Not a peep, but Margaret in billing says they've already upgraded all the computers. Everything's different. New software, new systems. She said it's like working in one of those fancy city hospitals now. A maintenance worker walked past carrying paint samples. The chosen shade was a warm, calming blue, worlds away from the institutional beige that had covered these walls for decades. Noah watched as another worker carefully removed the old radiology department sign, replacing it with a sleek, modern version. Dr. Whitaker, a young man in a crisp suit, approached the desk. The contractors need your input on the renovation plans for the pediatric wing. Noah blinked in surprise. My input? I thought my position was under review. The man consulted his tablet. According to my notes, you're still chief of pediatrics. The new ownership values your experience and knowledge of the community's needs. Down the hall, workers were installing new lighting fixtures. The difference was striking, the harsh fluorescent glare replaced by softer, more natural illumination. Noah couldn't deny that every change seemed thoughtful, aimed at creating a more welcoming environment. During his rounds, Noah noticed more improvements. The rickety chairs in the waiting room had disappeared, replaced by comfortable seating. New medical equipment arrived hourly. Even the coffee in the break room had been upgraded. The old drip machine replaced by a fancy espresso maker that looked like it belonged in an upscale cafe. It's like Christmas morning, remarked Dr. Chen, his colleague from internal medicine, as they watched workers install a state-of-the-art patient monitoring system. But nobody knows Santa's name. Noah's phone buzzed. Another message from the mysterious administration requesting his presence in various planning meetings. They valued his opinion on everything from layout changes to new treatment protocols. Yet he still had no idea who was signing the checks. By early afternoon, the transformation was impossible to ignore. The pharmacy had been completely reorganized with a new inventory system. The emergency room had new beds with built-in monitoring equipment. Even the old vending machines had been replaced with healthier options. Look at this, said Julie, showing Noah a new tablet. All patient records are being digitized with some fancy new software. It's actually amazing. Everything's connected, accessible, but totally secure. I've never seen anything like it. Noah studied the interface. It was intuitive, efficient, exactly what they'd needed for years but could never afford. His confusion grew. Who had the resources and knowledge to implement such comprehensive changes? The sound of expensive tires on pavement drew his attention to the window. A sleek black car, the kind that cost more than he made in a year, pulled into the parking lot. The vehicle moved smoothly into the space reserved for hospital administration, its tinted windows reflecting the afternoon sun. Noah watched as the driver's door opened. A tall woman stepped out, her movements graceful and assured. She wore a tailored charcoal suit that spoke of quiet wealth. Her dark hair swept back in an elegant knot. Something about her seemed familiar, tugging at his memory. She turned toward the building, and Noah's breath caught in his throat. The years had changed her, but he knew that face. The frightened young woman who'd arrived in his ER during a snowstorm was gone. In her place stood Jade Freeman, transformed but unmistakable. Noah stood frozen at the window, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The clipboard in his hand slipped, clattering to the floor, but he barely noticed. Through the glass, Jade's eyes lifted to the second floor where he stood, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. Noah stood frozen in his office doorway, his mind struggling to reconcile the frightened young mother from years ago with the confident woman before him. Jade Freeman walked past him with measured steps, her heels clicking softly against the floor. She wore a simple but elegant navy business suit, her dark hair swept into a neat bun. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to one of the chairs facing his desk. Noah nodded, still processing the transformation. He closed the door and made his way to his own chair, noting how Jade's eyes took in every detail of his cramped office. The stack of medical journals, the children's drawings from grateful patients, the family photo of him and Sarah at her last recital. "I imagine you have questions," Jade said, breaking the silence. Her voice was steady, but her fingers fidgeted with the sleeve of her jacket. "More than a few," Noah admitted, leaning forward, "starting with how you're here, looking like." He gestured vaguely at her complete transformation. Jade's composed expression cracked slightly, revealing a glimpse of vulnerability. "That night, you helped us. My son Tommy and me. We'd been running for 3 days straight. My ex-husband." She paused, taking a deep breath. "He'd found us at the last shelter." Noah's hands tightened on his armrests, remembering the bruises he'd noticed during her examination. "Your kindness that night," Jade continued. "It wasn't just medical care. You treated us like people, not problems. You gave us dignity." Her voice wavered slightly. "Do you know what that means to someone who's lost everything?" You didn't lose everything, Noah said gently. You had Tommy, and clearly, you had more strength than anyone knew. A small smile touched Jade's lips. After we left, I made it to Pittsburgh, found a women's shelter that offered job training. The director there, she saw something in me, like you did, got me into a community college program for computer programming. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot where her car sat. I was good at it, really good. Started doing freelance work between classes, build websites for local businesses. Then I had an idea for healthcare software, something to help small hospitals manage their resources better, track supplies, coordinate care with minimal staff. Noah listened intently as she turned back to face him. Tommy would sleep under my desk while I coded at night. We lived on ramen noodles and dreams for 2 years. But the software worked. It really worked. The startup? Noah asked, beginning to understand. Jade nodded. MedConnect. We got our first investor 3 years ago. 6 months ago, we sold to one of the biggest healthcare tech companies in the country. She sat back down, meeting his eyes directly. I kept thinking about this place, about you, about all the small hospitals struggling to stay open. So, you bought Maple Hollow, Noah said softly. I bought hope, Jade corrected him, just like you gave me. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a tablet, bringing up charts and plans. This hospital doesn't just need money. It needs modernization, efficiency, better resource management. But most importantly, it needs to keep its heart. Noah frowned slightly. The board said my position was under review. Because I requested it, Jade admitted. Not to fire you, to promote you. I need someone who understands both medicine and mercy to be chief of medicine. Someone who'll help me transform this place while keeping its soul intact. Tears pricked at Noah's eyes as he processed her words. Here was the answer to his prayers, delivered by someone he'd helped years ago without a second thought. Why didn't you tell me who you were when you bought the hospital? He asked. Jade's expression softened. I needed to see if things here were still the same. If you were still the same man who helped a desperate mother and her sick child without questioning whether they deserved it. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. You saved me, Dr. Whitaker. I'm here to return that grace, but I need your help. The morning sun had shifted, casting new shadows across the office floor. In the quiet moment between them, Noah could hear the distant sounds of the hospital, footsteps, voices, the steady pulse of life and healing. It was the soundtrack to his life's work, one he'd thought he might lose forever. Morning sun streamed through the hospital windows, catching dust motes from the construction work that had begun in earnest. Noah walked through the familiar corridors that now hummed with activity, watching as workers carefully removed old equipment and brought in gleaming new machines. Jade stood in the main lobby, tablet in hand, directing the transformation with quiet authority. She wore a simple blazer and jeans, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Gone was any trace of the frightened woman who had stumbled into the ER that snowy night. In her place stood someone who radiated purpose. Dr. Whitaker, she called out, gesturing him over. What do you think about the new imaging equipment coming in? Noah examined the specifications on her tablet. His eyes widened at the cutting-edge features. This is incredible, but the costs must be astronomical. The community deserves the best, Jade said simply. She pointed to the East Wing. We're converting that unused storage space into a proper pediatric unit. Your suggestion about child-friendly waiting areas was spot on. Throughout the day, Noah watched in amazement as years of neglect were stripped away. Fresh paint, brightened, dingy walls. New flooring replaced worn linoleum. The staff break room transformed into a proper relaxation space with comfortable furniture and a fully stocked kitchen. During lunch, Sarah stopped by with her violin case, having just finished school. Her eyes lit up at the changes. Dad, look at everything. She ran her hand along a newly installed handrail. It's like a completely different place. Jade appeared, carrying a stack of blueprints. Sarah, perfect timing. Would you mind giving your opinion on something? She led them to what would become the pediatric wing. We're thinking of having a music therapy room. As our resident musician, what features would you suggest? Sarah's face glowed as she offered ideas about acoustics and instrument storage. Noah noticed how Jade listened intently, taking notes and asking follow-up questions. She treated Sarah's input with the same respect she showed the contractors and medical staff. Weeks passed, and the hospital transformed piece by piece. New doctors and nurses joined the team. carefully selected not just for their skills, but for their commitment to community care. Jade insisted on interviewing each one personally. Experience matters, she explained to Noah one afternoon as they reviewed applications. But compassion matters more. We need people who will treat patients the way you treated me, like human beings worthy of dignity, regardless of their circumstances. The renovation reached every corner of the facility. The pharmacy was modernized with an automated dispensing system. The emergency room expanded with separate trauma and triage areas. Even the parking lot was repaved, with better lighting and security cameras installed. One morning, Noah arrived to find workers installing a large sign near the entrance, the Freeman Whitaker Community Health Center. "I hope you don't mind," Jade said quietly, appearing beside him. "This place represents both our stories now." Noah struggled to find words. I just did what any doctor would do." Jade shook her head. "No, you did what a good person does. You showed kindness without expecting anything in return. That's what this hospital will continue to do." The day of the reopening ceremony arrived bright and clear. Chairs filled the front plaza where a red ribbon stretched across the new entrance. Local news crews set up their cameras while community members gathered in growing numbers. Sarah stood to the side, violin ready, wearing a blue dress that matched the new hospital logo. She had practiced for weeks, choosing pieces that spoke of hope and new beginnings. Noah adjusted his tie nervously, watching from behind the small stage as Jade prepared to address the crowd. She caught his eye and smiled warmly. The ceremony began with Sarah's music soaring over the assembled crowd. Her violin sang with joy and promise, the notes dancing in the morning air. Noah felt tears welling up as he watched his daughter play with such confidence and grace. Jade stepped to the microphone after the applause faded. "Years ago, I came to this hospital with nothing but desperation and fear. Dr. Noah Whitaker and this community gave me something priceless. They gave me hope. Today, we reopen these doors with a promise. That same hope will be available to anyone who needs it." She turned to Noah, gesturing him forward. Together, they cut the ribbon as cameras flashed and the crowd cheered. Sarah started playing again, this time a triumphant melody that seemed to make the very air sparkle with possibility. Noah looked at the shining new building, at his daughter's radiant face, at the community gathered in celebration. His vision blurred with tears of pride and gratitude. This was more than just a renovated hospital. It was proof that one act of kindness could grow into something extraordinary. The doors opened, and a new chapter began. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the hospital's newly installed windows as Jade gathered the staff in the refurbished conference room. Noah noticed how different she looked from that snowy night months ago. Confident, composed, wearing a simple but elegant navy blazer. Her son Milo sat quietly in a corner, coloring with Sarah, who had stopped by after school. "There's one more announcement," Jade said, her voice steady but touched with emotion. She clicked to the next slide in her presentation, revealing architectural renderings. "We're building a comprehensive recovery wing for survivors of domestic abuse." A ripple of surprise moved through the room. Noah leaned forward in his chair, studying the detailed plans on the screen. "The Freeman Center," Jade continued, "will offer more than just medical care. We're creating a safe space where survivors can heal both, physically and emotionally." Her hands trembled slightly as she spoke, but her voice remained firm. "There will be private rooms, counseling services, job training programs, and legal assistance all under one roof." Noah watched as she walked through the features: secure entrance protocols, children's play areas, and private consultation rooms. The plan showed careful attention to every detail, down to the soothing color schemes and comfortable furnishings. Each suite, Jade explained, pointing to the blueprint, will have its own bathroom and small kitchenette. "We want residents to maintain their dignity and independence while they recover." She paused, taking a deep breath. When you're rebuilding your life, having your own space matters more than most people realize. From the corner, Milo looked up from his coloring book and gave his mother a small wave. Jade's face softened as she smiled back at him. "The funding is already secured," she continued, straightening her shoulders. "Construction begins next week, but this center needs more than just buildings and equipment. It needs the right people." She turned to face the staff directly. "I'm looking for volunteers who want additional training in trauma-informed care. This isn't just about medical treatment, it's about creating a sanctuary." Several hands shot up immediately, including most of the nursing staff. Noah felt a surge of pride in his team's eagerness to help. After the presentation, as other staff members filed out, Jade approached Noah. "Would you walk with me?" she asked quietly. "There's something I'd like to show you." They left Sarah watching Milo and made their way through the corridors, their footsteps echoing on the new flooring. The renovation had transformed the hospital's once dreary hallways into warm, welcoming spaces with soft lighting and artwork on the walls. "You know," Jade said as they walked, "I spent weeks planning this center. Every night, after putting Milo to bed, I'd work on the designs." She stopped at a window, looking out at the construction equipment gathered in the side lot. "I kept thinking about what I needed most when I was running, what would have made a difference." Noah nodded, remembering how she'd looked that winter night, holding her feverish child, afraid to ask for help. "You've thought of everything," he said softly. "Almost," Jade replied with a small smile. "There's one more thing." She led him down another hallway, one he knew well, the path to the old guest suite where she'd stayed that night. The door opened to reveal a completely transformed space. The institutional furniture was gone, replaced by comfortable chairs and a plush sofa. Warm lamplight cast a gentle glow over new wood flooring and sage-colored walls. A small kitchen area gleamed in one corner, and through another door, Noah glimpsed a renovated bathroom with a deep tub. "This," Jade said, her voice barely above a whisper, "is the healing suite. It's where we'll welcome new arrivals, like you welcomed me." She ran her hand along the back of a chair, her fingers trembling slightly. "This is where they'll take their first steps toward a new life." Noah stood in the doorway, taking in every detail. The room even had a separate sleeping area with a child's bed beside the main one. He thought about how many nights he'd walked past this door, wondering what had become of Jade and her son. "This is where I became someone new," Jade whispered, looking around the room with glistening eyes. "That night, you gave us shelter. It wasn't just about having a safe place to sleep. It was about being treated like a person worthy of kindness." She touched the wall gently, as if connecting with a memory. "I want others to feel that same possibility." Noah noticed a small framed quote on the wall. "Every journey toward healing begins with a single act of kindness." Below it hung a simple sketch of the hospital as it had looked that snowy night, drawn in soft charcoal strokes. The room held such purpose in every detail, from the sturdy locks on the doors to the emergency phone by the bed. From the children's books on the shelf to the well-stocked first aid kit, it was both a sanctuary and a statement. "You are safe here. You matter here." Jade stood in the center of the room, her posture straight but her expression vulnerable. "Do you think it will help them?" she asked softly. "The ones who come here like I did?" Noah looked at the woman before him, no longer the frightened mother seeking shelter, but a force for change who had transformed her pain into purpose. He saw in her eyes the same compassion that had driven her to build all this, the same strength that had helped her rebuild her own life. "Yes," he answered simply, his voice thick with emotion. "It already has." The afternoon sun streamed through the windows of Jade's new office, warming the rich wooden desk between them. Noah sat across from her, his hands clasped in his lap, still wearing his white coat from morning rounds. The fresh paint smell lingered in the air, a reminder of all the changes the past few weeks had brought. "Dr. Whitaker?" Jade began, then smiled softly. "Noah, I've been reviewing the hospital's organizational structure." She pulled out a folder and opened it carefully. "The board and I have created a new position, and I want you to fill it." Noah shifted in his chair, uncertain. After months of financial worry, he'd learned to brace himself for both good and bad news. "What position is that?" "Chief of Compassionate Care." Jade's eyes sparkled as she said it. "You'll oversee patient experience, community outreach, and our new assistance programs, including the Freeman Center." Noah blinked, trying to process her words. "That's quite a responsibility." "It's exactly what you've already been doing for years," Jade replied, "just without the title or proper compensation." She slid a document across the desk. "This is the official offer." Noah picked up the paper, and his eyes widened as he read the salary figure. It was more than double what he'd been making. There was also a housing allowance listed that would cover most of his mortgage. I don't know what to say," he managed, his voice thick with emotion. "Say yes," Jade said simply. "The hospital needs you. I need you. This place gave me hope when I had none. Because of you, now we can do that for others, properly funded and supported." Noah looked down at his hands, thinking of all the late nights worrying about bills, about Sarah's college fund, about keeping the lights on. "The salary, it's very generous." "It's fair," Jade corrected firmly. "You've been underpaid for years while carrying this place on your shoulders. That ends now." She leaned forward. You taught me something important that night, Noah. Kindness isn't just about good intentions. It needs proper support and resources to truly help people. Noah nodded, thinking of all the times he'd wanted to do more for patients but couldn't due to budget constraints. You're right about that. The housing stipend is non-negotiable, Jade added with a knowing look. Sarah mentioned you've been thinking about downsizing to afford her music school. She shouldn't worry about that, Noah said quietly. She worries because she loves you, Jade replied. Just like you worry about her. Accept the help, Noah. You've spent years helping others. Let someone help you for a change. Noah looked at the contract again, feeling a weight lifting from his shoulders that he'd carried for so long he'd almost forgotten it was there. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for the pen Jade offered. Thank you, he said softly, signing his name. Not just for this, but for coming back, for believing in this place. Thank you for giving me something to believe in when I needed it most, Jade answered. She stood and extended her hand. Welcome to your new role, Chief Whitaker. Noah shook her hand, then excused himself to call Sarah. As he walked through the newly renovated halls, he felt lighter than he had in years. The constant knot of financial worry in his stomach began to unwind. For the first time in so long, he could breathe easy. Later that evening, Noah's kitchen filled with the warm scent of vanilla and sugar. Sarah had insisted on baking a celebration cake, even though it was a school night. She'd mix the batter while Noah watched, both of them laughing as flour dusted their clothes. Now they sat at their small kitchen table, enjoying slightly lopsided but delicious homemade cake. Sarah had decorated it with wobbly blue frosting letters spelling out, "Congratulations, Dad. I can't believe Miss Freeman did all this," Sarah said, licking frosting from her fork. It's like a fairy tale. Noah smiled, watching his daughter's face glow with happiness. Life can surprise you sometimes. In good ways, too, not just the hard ones. You deserve this. Dad. Sarah put down her fork and looked at him seriously. You've always helped everyone else, even when things were tough for us. Remember last winter when you gave your lunch to that homeless man outside the hospital? You noticed that? Noah asked, surprised. I notice everything, Sarah said with a small smile. Like how you skip coffee some mornings to save money, or wear your old shoes even though they're falling apart. She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Thank you for always putting others first, even when it was hard. Noah felt his eyes grow misty. Sarah, honey. I'm really proud of you, Dad, she said simply. Mom would be too. Noah squeezed her hand back, his heart full. The kitchen was warm, the cake was sweet, and for the first time in years, tomorrow didn't feel like something to worry about. It felt like something to look forward to. The hospital corridors grew quiet as evening settled in. Most of the staff had gone home, leaving only the night shift to tend to patients. In his newly renovated office, Noah sorted through patient files, his desk lamp casting a warm glow across scattered papers. A gentle knock at the door made him look up. Jade stood in the doorway, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. I thought you might need this, she said, stepping inside. Her heels clicked softly against the polished floor as she approached his desk. You're still here? Noah asked, accepting the cup gratefully. The rich aroma of fresh coffee filled his nose. Same could be said about you, Jade replied with a small smile. She settled into one of the comfortable chairs across from his desk, tucking her legs beneath her in a casual way that seemed at odds with her elegant business attire. Noah took a sip of the coffee and raised his eyebrows. This isn't from the cafeteria. I brought my own coffee maker, she admitted. Hospital coffee is. She wrinkled her nose, making Noah chuckle. Terrible? Yeah, we know. It's been on my list of things to improve, but there were always more pressing matters. Like keeping the lights on? Jade's voice was gentle, understanding. Noah nodded, running a hand through his graying hair. Among other things. You know, I still can't believe how much has changed in just a few weeks. Jade set her cup down and leaned forward slightly. Tell me about before, about when you first started here. Noah's eyes grew distant as he remembered. It was different then. Fuller staff, more resources. My wife was still alive. He paused, surprised at himself for mentioning her. He rarely did. Jade's expression softened. What was she like? Marie was? She was music, Noah said quietly. She taught piano at the high school. That's where Sarah gets her talent from. Marie could light up a room just by walking into it. He smiled at the memory. She used to bring lunch to the hospital every Wednesday, without fail. Said hospital food would kill me faster than my working hours. Jade, listened intently, her eyes warm with empathy. How long ago? 6 years, Noah replied. Cancer. Ironic, isn't it? A doctor who couldn't save his own wife. That's not fair to yourself, Jade said firmly. You can't save everyone, Noah, but you saved so many. Their eyes met across the desk, and something shifted in the air between them. Noah cleared his throat and took another sip of coffee. What about you? He asked. There must be more to your story than what you've told me. Jade was quiet for a moment, tracing the rim of her coffee cup with one finger. Did you know I learned a code in a public library? After I left here with Tommy, we stayed at a women's shelter in the next town. During the day, while he was in their daycare program, I'd walk to the library. Taught myself programming from free online courses. That's impressive, Noah said softly. I was terrified every day, she continued. Afraid he'd find us. Afraid I'd fail. Afraid I couldn't give Tommy the life he deserved. But that night here, in that guest room, she looked up at Noah. You showed me what kindness looked like. Real kindness, without expecting anything in return. Noah felt his chest tighten with emotion. You didn't need me to save you, Jade. You saved yourself. Maybe, she said with a small smile, but you gave me a safe place to start. They talked for hours, sharing stories that flowed as easily as the coffee. Jade told him about building her first app, about the investors who initially dismissed her, about her breakthrough moment. Noah shared tales of Sarah growing up, of difficult cases with happy endings, of the community that had become his extended family. As the night deepened, their conversation grew more personal. Jade described her dreams for the Freeman Center, her voice passionate and animated. Noah found himself watching the way her hands moved as she talked, the subtle changes in her expression, the light in her eyes. I want it to be more than just a shelter, she explained. I want it to be a place of transformation, where people can heal and grow and dream again. Like you did, Noah observed. Yes, she said softly, like I did. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight, but neither seemed to notice. They had moved to the small seating area in the corner of his office, where the chairs were more comfortable. Noah stifled a yawn. You should get some rest, Jade said, noticing his fatigue. I'm fine, he insisted, but his eyes were heavy. Just need to finish these last few files. He moved back to his desk, but his movements were slower now. Jade watched as he reviewed patient charts, his head nodding slightly. Within minutes, his breathing had deepened, and his head rested on his arm. Jade stood quietly and walked to the supply closet, where she knew extra blankets were kept. She selected a soft, warm one and returned to Noah's desk. Carefully, trying not to wake him, she draped the blanket over his shoulders. For a moment, she stood there, looking at his peaceful face in the dim light. She reached out as if to brush a strand of hair from his forehead, but stopped herself. Instead, she gathered their empty coffee cups and turned off his desk lamp, leaving only the soft glow of his computer screen. At the door, she paused for one last look, then slipped out quietly, closing the door behind her with a soft click. Gerald Manning sat in his home office, the glow of his computer screen illuminating his weathered face. After 30 years on Maple Hollow Community Hospital's board, being pushed aside stung more than he cared to admit. His fingers drummed against his mahogany desk as he scrolled through public records. Who does she think she is? He muttered, reaching for his cold coffee. The mysterious Jade Freeman had swooped in, bought their hospital, and dismissed half the board without so much as a proper introduction. Something about her story didn't add up. The morning light crept through his window as he dug deeper. Court records, police reports, news articles from small-town papers. With each click, his frown deepened. Piece by piece, Jade Freeman's past emerged like a jigsaw puzzle with jagged edges. He picked up his phone and dialed Roger Kent, editor of the Maple Hollow Gazette. Roger, it's Gerald. Remember that favor you owe me? I've got something you'll want to see. Later that morning, Roger sat across from Gerald, reviewing the documents spread across the desk. His eyebrows shot up as he read. This is explosive stuff, Gerald. Are you sure about this? Every bit of it's public record, Gerald said, leaning back in his chair. Our mystery savior isn't quite what she seems. Roger adjusted his glasses. Domestic violence shelters in 3 states, a restraining order against an ex-husband, questionable gaps in employment. He shuffled through more papers, and her company, founded just 4 years ago, sold for millions after a meteoric rise. Some might call that suspicious. The board trusted her blindly, Gerald said, his voice tight with anger. No background check, no due diligence. Now she's making decisions that affect our whole community. Roger nodded slowly, gathering the documents. I'll have my team verify everything. We'll run the story tomorrow. The next morning, the article dominated the front page of the Maple Hollow Gazette. The headline blared, "Hospital Savior's Shadowy Past Raises Questions." The story painted a damning picture. It described Jade as a woman with a checkered history who had drifted between shelters before suddenly acquiring wealth through questionable means. Her tech company's rapid success was portrayed as suspicious, with implications of possible fraud or manipulation. By mid-morning, the article had spread across social media. Local news stations picked it up, adding their own speculation. The hospital's phone lines lit up with concerned calls from donors and community members. In the hospital cafeteria, whispers followed Jade as she walked past. Staff members who had welcomed her warmly just days ago now avoided eye contact. A group of nurses huddled around a smartphone, reading the article with wide eyes. "I heard she's using fake credentials," one nurse whispered. "My cousin works at the bank. Says there's something fishy about where the money came from," another added. The hospital's largest donor, Martha Whitfield, called to suspend her annual contribution pending an investigation. Two local business leaders withdrew their support for the new domestic violence wing. The Chamber of Commerce requested an emergency meeting to discuss the hospital's leadership. At the grocery store, an elderly woman clutched her pearls when Jade passed by. "That's her," she stage whispered to her companion. "The one from the paper. To think we trusted her with our hospital." By afternoon, the story had gone viral beyond Maple Hollow. Regional news outlets picked it up, adding their own sensational touches. One website questioned whether the hospital purchase was part of a larger scheme. Another suggested Jade's past made her unfit to run a healthcare facility. Local politicians began distancing themselves. Mayor Thompson, who had proudly cut the ribbon at the ER reopening, issued a statement expressing deep concern about the revelations. The city council scheduled an emergency session to discuss the hospital's permits. In the hospital parking lot, a small group of protesters gathered with hastily made signs. "No secrets in our hospital," read one. "Protect our community," declared another. Inside her office, Jade sat perfectly still, staring at the article on her computer screen. The carefully crafted words twisted her survival story into something dark and shameful. Her journey from abuse victim to successful entrepreneur was portrayed as suspicious rather than inspiring. The shelters that had saved her life were described as seedy hideouts. A text message buzzed on her phone from a board member. "Emergency meeting called for tomorrow morning. Please be prepared to address these concerns." Through her office window, she could see more news vans pulling into the parking lot. Reporters stood with microphones, ready to broadcast updates on the scandal that had rocked the small town. The hospital's PR director rushed in with a stack of messages. "The medical board wants a statement. 3 more donors have pulled out. The Chamber of Commerce is threatening to revoke our Business Leadership Award." She paused, looking uncomfortable. "And the domestic violence support groups. They're wondering if they should find another partner for their programs." Down in the ER waiting room, a mother pulled her child closer as Jade walked past. The same people who had celebrated her vision for the hospital now looked at her with suspicion and fear. The trust she had carefully built was crumbling under the weight of twisted truths and cruel implications. At the nurses' station, a group quickly dispersed as she approached, leaving behind a copy of the newspaper. The headline seemed to mock her, "From shelter hopper to hospital owner, the truth about Jade Freeman." The article had achieved exactly what Gerald Manning intended. It hadn't just exposed Jade's past, it had weaponized it. Her history of survival became evidence of untrustworthiness. Her business success was transformed into proof of deceit. The very experiences that had driven her to help others were now being used to destroy everything she had built. As the day drew to a close, the damage was clear. The hospital that had been buzzing with hope and renewal just days ago now felt heavy with doubt and suspicion. The community that had embraced change now clamored for answers. And Jade Freeman, who had returned to repay an act of kindness, found herself at the center of a storm that threatened to sweep away not just her reputation, but the future of Maple Hollow Community Hospital itself. The morning sun struggled to break through heavy clouds, casting long shadows across the hospital parking lot. No one noticed fewer cars than usual as he walked through the automatic doors. The normally bustling lobby felt eerily quiet, save for the whispers that stopped abruptly when he passed by. At the nurses' station, Linda, their most experienced nurse, gave him a worried look. "Dr. Whitaker, have you seen today's paper?" Noah picked up the folded newspaper on the counter. His stomach dropped as he read the headline, Hospital Savior's Dark Past. Questions surface about Freeman's history. The article painted Jade as an opportunist with a suspicious rise to wealth, questioning everything from her education to her business dealings. People are talking, Linda said softly. Some patients have already called to cancel their appointments. Noah's jaw tightened. They don't know her like we do. He headed toward Jade's office, his footsteps echoing in the hallway. Through the frosted glass, he could see her silhouette. He knocked gently. Jade? It's Noah. No response. He tried the handle. Locked. Please, let me in. After a long pause, he heard the lock click. Noah entered to find Jade sitting at her desk, surrounded by open letters. Her usual composed demeanor had cracked. Her eyes were red-rimmed, though she wasn't crying now. I should have known this would happen, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She held up one of the letters. Want to hear what the good people of Maple Hollow think about me? Jade, don't. How dare you pretend to be something you're not, she read. Your kind doesn't belong here. Go back to wherever you came from before you destroy what little this town has left. She dropped the letter and picked up another. What else are you hiding? Who's going to trust their health to someone who— Stop, Noah said firmly, moving around the desk. He gathered the letters and pushed them aside. These people don't know you, but they will, Jade said, standing up. She walked to the window, arms wrapped around herself. Everything in that article is true, Noah. I did live in shelters. I did work minimum wage jobs. I did escape with nothing but a backpack and my son. Her shoulders tensed. And now everyone knows. And that makes you unworthy? Noah's voice carried a hint of anger. That makes you less qualified to run this hospital? It makes people uncomfortable, she replied. It makes them question everything, and they should. She turned to face him, her expression resolved. I'm resigning. What? Noah felt like he'd been punched in the gut. You can't. I have to. The hospital's reputation has never been better, Noah interrupted. Look at what you've done here. New equipment, better staffing, the Freeman Center, which no one will trust now, Jade's voice cracked. Who's going to seek help at a domestic violence center run by someone they think is suspicious? Who's going to donate to a hospital led by someone they believe is a fraud? Noah watched as she moved to her desk and began gathering her personal items. So you're just going to give up? Let them win? I'm being realistic, she said, though her hands trembled as she picked up a framed photo of her son. Some reputations don't survive the truth, Noah, no matter how much good you try to do afterward. That's not true. Noah stepped closer. You told me once that this hospital is where you became someone new, remember? In that guest room? Jade stilled, the photo clutched to her chest. You were broken then, Noah continued softly. Scared. But you found strength here. You rebuilt yourself, and now you're helping others do the same. It's different now, she whispered. Is it? Noah picked up one of the hate letters. These words? They're just echoes of the same fear and judgment you faced before. But you're stronger now. You have people who know the real you. Tears welled in Jade's eyes. I can't let this hurt the hospital. Everything we've built will crumble without you, Noah finished. This place needs you, Jade. The staff needs you. The patients need you. He paused, his voice softening. I need you. Jade looked at him, surprise flickering across her face. Stay, Noah pleaded. Fight this. Show them who you really are. He gestured to the window, where the Freeman Center stood proudly. Show them that surviving makes you stronger, not weaker. That your past is part of your strength, not your shame. Jade set the photo down slowly, her fingers lingering on the frame. Some of the donors are already pulling out. Then we'll find new ones who understand that real change comes from people who've lived through darkness and chosen to create light. A tear slipped down Jade's cheek. Some reputations don't survive the truth, she repeated, but this time her voice wavered with uncertainty. Noah stepped forward, his hand hovering near hers on the desk. Then we build a new reputation, together, one act of kindness at a time, just like you did for this hospital. The morning after the news broke, Maple Hollow Community Hospital felt like two different places at once. In the main lobby, Carrie from reception wore a blue ribbon pinned to her sweater, a symbol of support for Jade that had spread overnight through social media. Next to her, Mark from accounting pointedly refused to wear one, his disapproving frown deepening every time someone walked by with a ribbon. She lied to all of us, Mark muttered, shuffling papers with more force than necessary. How can we trust anything she says? Carrie's voice was sharp as she responded. She didn't lie. She just didn't broadcast her past. There's a difference. Noah watched this exchange from the hallway, his heart heavy. All through the hospital, similar scenes played out. The surgical wing staff had split right down the middle, half defending Jade's right to privacy, half insisting her past made her unfit to run a medical facility. Even the cafeteria had become a battleground of sorts, with tables clearly divided between supporters and critics. By mid-morning, local news vans had started gathering in the parking lot. Noah spotted Sarah's violin teacher, Mrs. Chen, giving an impassioned interview to Channel 5. Jade Freeman turned this hospital around. Mrs. Chen was saying firmly into the microphone. She saved jobs, upgraded equipment, and created a safe place for abuse survivors. That's what matters. But across the street, a small group of protesters had gathered with hastily made signs. No secrets in healthcare, read one. Truth matters, declared another. Noah recognized some faces from the old hospital board among them. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from both sides. Dr. Patterson, their top surgeon, threatened to resign if Jade stayed. Minutes later, the entire nursing staff from the Freeman Center sent a group text declaring they'd walk out if Jade left. Around lunchtime, Noah found himself in the hospital chapel. The small room was empty, except for Maria, one of their longest-serving nurses. She sat in the back pew, her hands clasped tightly. "I was here that night," Maria said softly as Noah sat beside her. "The night she first came in with her little boy. I remember how scared she looked." Noah nodded, remembering too. She's not that person anymore. "No," Maria agreed. "She's stronger now, but that strength came from surviving, didn't it?" The afternoon brought more chaos. The local paper ran competing opinion pieces, one praising Jade's philanthropy, another questioning her motives. The hospital's social media accounts were flooded with comments from community members taking sides. Noah watched it all unfold while trying to keep the hospital running. He treated a broken arm while overhearing two mothers in the waiting room argue about Jade's character. He signed off on medication orders while his staff debated whether her past made her unsuitable for leadership. By early evening, the division had spread beyond the hospital. At the grocery store, Noah overheard heated discussions in every aisle. The diner where he sometimes grabbed coffee had become an unofficial meeting spot for Jade's supporters, while the bar across the street filled with her critics. Sarah called him between classes, worried about what she was seeing online. "Dad, they're being so cruel," she said, her voice trembling. "How can they forget everything she's done for us?" That's when Noah knew he had to act. He couldn't let this tear apart everything they'd built. The hospital wasn't just a building, it was the heart of their community. And Jade wasn't just its owner, she was living proof that second chances could lead to extraordinary things. He started making calls, first to the town council, then to community leaders, local business owners, and longtime residents. Many were reluctant at first, but Noah's quiet persistence won them over. By nightfall, he'd secured the community center for an emergency town hall meeting the next evening. Back home, Noah sat at his kitchen table, a blank notepad before him. The house was quiet, except for Sarah practicing her violin upstairs, a gentle soundtrack to his thoughts. He picked up his pen and began to write. "I've been a doctor in this town for 15 years. I've treated your children, sat with your elderly parents, celebrated your recoveries, and mourned your losses. But tonight, I'm not writing to you as Dr. Whitaker. I'm writing as someone who has seen firsthand what courage looks like." The words flowed onto the page as outside, a light snow began to fall, just like the night Jade had first arrived at their door, carrying hope disguised as desperation. Noah wrote until his hand cramped, then kept writing. He wrote about second chances and redemption, about judgment and forgiveness. He wrote about a community's power to lift people up or tear them down. Most importantly, he wrote about transformation, not just of their hospital, but of the human spirit. As midnight approached, Sarah came downstairs for a glass of water. She found her father surrounded by crumpled paper, his desk lamp casting a warm glow across the kitchen table. "Is that your speech?" she asked softly. Noah looked up, his eyes tired but determined. "It is. I have to try, Sarah. I have to help them understand." Sarah picked up one of the discarded drafts and read a few lines. "Dad," she said, "this is beautiful." She hugged him from behind, resting her chin on his shoulder. "You're doing the right thing." Noah squeezed her hand, then turned back to his writing. The final draft took shape slowly but surely, each word carefully chosen. This wasn't just about saving Jade's reputation or the hospital's future. It was about reminding an entire town what really mattered. Not where someone came from, but who they chose to become. Outside his window, the snow continued to fall. covering Maple Hollow in a clean, white blanket. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for now, Noah had his task: to speak truth to prejudice, to stand up for second chances, and to remind his community that their greatest strength lay in their capacity for compassion. The Maple Hollow Community Center buzzed with tension as people filed into the cramped meeting hall. Metal chairs scraped against linoleum floors, while worried whispers bounced off pale yellow walls. Noah stood at the podium, his hands trembling slightly as he smoothed his wrinkled speech notes. Every seat was taken. People lined the walls, some wearing the blue ribbons that had become Jade's symbol of support, others with arms crossed and faces set in stern judgment. The local press huddled in one corner, cameras ready. Jade sat in the front row, her posture rigid but dignified. She wore a simple gray blazer, her face carefully neutral despite the occasional hostile glance thrown her way. Sarah sat beside her, violin case at her feet. She had insisted on coming to show support. Noah cleared his throat, and the room gradually fell silent. His voice, usually steady with patience, wavered slightly as he began. 10 years ago, I lost my wife Helen to cancer. The personal opening caught everyone off guard. I found myself a single father, working endless shifts, trying to keep this town's only hospital running while raising our daughter. I thought I was the one holding everything together. I was wrong. He paused, looking directly at the crowd. This hospital, our hospital, was failing. We all knew it. Empty halls, broken equipment, staff leaving for better opportunities. But worse than that, we were losing our soul. The very thing that made Maple Hollow special, our commitment to caring for everyone, regardless of their ability to pay. Several heads nodded. Others shifted uncomfortably. Then one snowy night, a young mother came in with a sick child. She had nothing, no money, no insurance, just desperation in her eyes. That woman was Jade Freeman. Jade's hands tightened in her lap, but she kept her gaze forward. I did what any of us would do, what this hospital was meant to do. I helped. What I didn't know was that by showing basic human kindness, I was setting in motion events that would save not just one family, but our entire community. Noah gestured to the renovated wing visible through the window. Look around. New equipment saving lives daily. A domestic violence center giving hope to those who had none. Jobs created. Lives transformed. All because that scared young mother didn't just survive. She thrived. And she came back to lift up the very community that once helped her. Mrs. Chen, who ran the local pharmacy, suddenly stood up. Her voice shook with emotion. My grandson had an asthma attack last month. The new pediatric unit saved his life. I don't care what happened in Miss Freeman's past. I care that my Tommy is alive. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Then Andrea Martinez, a local teacher, rose. My sister was trapped in an abusive marriage for years. The Freeman Center helped her escape, get counseling, find work. She's safe now. Her kids are safe. One by one, people began standing. A construction worker told how the hospital's new payment plan helped him afford his daughter's appendix surgery. A young mother spoke about the prenatal care program that guided her through a difficult pregnancy. Each story built on the last, painting a picture not of scandal, but of transformation, of hope restored, of lives changed. Noah watched as faces in the crowd softened, saw heads nodding where there had been frowns. Even some of the most vocal critics seemed to be reconsidering. Then, from the back of the room, an elderly man struggled to his feet. Everyone recognized Jack Wilson, a decorated Korean War veteran who rarely spoke at town meetings. His voice cracked as he addressed Jade directly. My Martha, we've been married 53 years. He wiped his eyes with a weathered hand. When she had that stroke, the old hospital, they said we'd have to transfer her to the city. We couldn't afford that. But your new stroke unit. He broke down, tears flowing freely. They saved her. She's home now, baking pies again. You gave me more years with my Martha. God bless you. The silence that followed was profound. Then someone began to clap. Others joined in, the applause building like a wave until it filled the room. People stood, blue ribbons or not, united in recognition of what their hospital had become. Jade remained seated, tears streaming down her face as the applause continued to swell. Sarah reached over and squeezed her hand, while Noah watched from the podium as the tide of public opinion visibly turned in the packed community center. For the first time since the scandal broke, hope flickered in Jade's eyes, not just for herself, but for everything she had built, everything she had fought to create in this small town that had once shown her kindness on a snowy night. The applause continued, drowning out the last echoes of gossip and doubt, replacing them with something stronger: gratitude, understanding, and acceptance. Jessica Martinez sat in the back row of the community center, her phone held steady as she live-streamed the town hall meeting to her social media account. The 16-year-old had never seen the hall so packed. Every seat was taken, with people standing shoulder to shoulder along the walls. As president of the high school's media club, she knew a powerful story when she saw one. Through her phone screen, she captured the raw emotion in the room. The elderly veteran who had just spoken was still wiping tears from his weathered face. His testimony about how Jade's renovated hospital had saved his wife had struck a deep chord with the crowd. More people began standing up, one after another, each with their own story to share. "My grandson was born here last month," a gray-haired woman announced, her voice trembling. "The new maternity wing meant I didn't have to drive him 2 hours to the city hospital. Miss Freeman gave us that gift." A young man in work boots rose next. "I cut my hand bad at the lumber mill. Would have lost my job if I had to go to Capital City for treatment. This hospital, Jade's hospital, saved my livelihood." Jessica's live stream counter ticked up steadily. Comments flooded in from beyond Maple Hollow. "Where is this? What's happening? Someone share this." A local reporter from the county newspaper jotted notes furiously. In the corner, a camera crew from the regional news station had arrived, drawn by calls from their viewers about the viral stream. Jade sat quietly in the front row, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Noah stood beside her, his presence steady and protective. The cruel newspaper article that had exposed her past lay forgotten on an empty chair. "My daughter," a woman in nursing scrubs, stood up, voice cracking. "She came to the Freeman Center last week, running from a bad situation." She paused, gathering strength. Jade didn't just give her medical care. She gave her hope, a chance to start over, just like she did. Jessica zoomed in on Jade's face as tears rolled silently down her cheeks. The teenager's social media notifications were exploding. Number Maple Hollow Hope was trending. By midnight, major news networks had picked up Jessica's video. It played on morning shows across the country. The small-town hospital saved by a domestic abuse survivor turned tech entrepreneur, now fighting to keep her mission alive amid controversy. Support poured in from everywhere. Domestic violence survivors shared their stories. Healthcare advocates praised the hospital's innovative approach. Former patients posted their own videos, defending Jade and the transformed facility. The next afternoon, Noah found Jade in her office, staring at her computer in disbelief. "Have you seen this?" she asked, turning the screen toward him. An online fundraising campaign for the hospital had raised over $200,000 in less than 24 hours. "People believe in what we're doing here?" Noah said softly, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "They believe in you." Jade shook her head, overwhelmed. "I never wanted attention. I just wanted to help." "Sometimes helping means being visible," Noah replied. "Your story gives others courage." The media attention grew. Reporters camped outside the hospital, hoping for interviews. National magazines requested features. Medical journals inquired about the hospital's unique approach to community care. 3 days after the town hall, Jade's assistant rushed into a staff meeting, waving her phone excitedly. "Governor Chin just tweeted about us." The governor's message was simple but powerful. Maple Hollow Community Hospital represents the future of rural healthcare, innovation driven by compassion. Looking forward to visiting this remarkable facility next week. The announcement sent the hospital staff into a flutter of activity. Word spread quickly through the small town. Even those who had questioned Jade's leadership now spoke proudly about their local hospital gaining state recognition. That evening, Jade found a moment of quiet in the old guest suite, her former sanctuary. She ran her hand along the freshly painted wall, remembering that snowy night when she'd arrived desperate and afraid. Noah's kindness had changed everything. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Jessica Martinez, still carrying her ever-present phone. "Miss Freeman?" the teenager asked hesitantly. "I wanted to apologize if my video caused you more stress. I thought people needed to hear the truth." Jade smiled warmly. "You help people see the heart of this place, Jessica. That's nothing to apologize for." "The governor's really coming?" Jessica's eyes sparkled with excitement. "Apparently so." Jade laughed softly. "Though I'm more proud of what happens here every day. The lives we touch, the hope we give. That's the real story." Jessica nodded thoughtfully. "That's what made the video go viral, you know. Not the controversy or the politics, just real people talking about real kindness. That's what people are hungry for. As the teen left, Jade walked to the window. The hospital's lights glowed warmly in the evening darkness, a beacon of hope she had once followed and now helped maintain. Governor Chen's visit would bring attention and resources, but the true validation had already come. In the tears of that elderly veteran, in the gratitude of the mill worker, in the fierce support of the community that had become her home. The next morning, an official letter arrived from the governor's office. The visit would include a special ceremony to recognize the hospital's innovative approach to rural health care. Noah found Jade reading it in her office, her expression thoughtful. "You okay?" he asked, closing the door behind him. "I kept thinking I had to prove myself," she said quietly, "that my past would always be a liability, but maybe." She looked up at him, her eyes clear and bright. Maybe it was always meant to be part of the healing, not just mine, but others too. Through the window, they could see the hospital's newly painted sign catching the morning sun. Maple Hollow Community Hospital, where compassion heals. Below it, the Freeman Center's doors stood open, ready to welcome those seeking a fresh start, just as Jade had once found hers. The governor's office had scheduled the visit for the following Tuesday. As staff prepared and the town buzzed with excitement, Jade remained focused on what mattered most, the daily work of healing, hope, and second chances. The same work that had begun on a snowy night with one doctor's simple act of kindness, now rippling out to touch countless lives. The morning sun gleamed off the fresh snow as Governor Lydia Chen's motorcade pulled up to Maple Hollow Hospital. A crowd had gathered despite the cold, their breath visible in the crisp winter air. Handmade signs bobbed above the crowd. "We stand with Jade and compassion heals." Inside the hospital lobby, Jade Freeman stood quietly beside Dr. Noah Whitaker, her hands clasped tightly together. She wore a simple navy blazer, her usual confidence wavering slightly as camera flashes lit up the entrance. "You okay?" Noah whispered, noticing her tension. Jade managed a small nod. "Just never thought I'd be standing here like this." The glass door swooshed open, and Governor Chen strode in, her red wool coat bright against the hospital's muted tones. She moved with practiced grace, flanked by aides and security, but her warm smile seemed genuine as she approached Jade and Noah. "Miss Freeman," the governor extended her hand. "I've heard so much about your work here." "Thank you for coming, Governor." Jade's voice was steady despite her nerves. "We're honored." The lobby had been transformed for the ceremony. Rows of chairs faced a small podium, with the hospital staff seated in their white coats and scrubs. Sarah Whitaker sat in the front row, her violin case tucked beneath her chair. She would be performing the state anthem to open the ceremony. As Sarah played the first notes, Noah felt his chest tighten with pride. His daughter's music filled the space, transforming the institutional setting into something almost sacred. He glanced at Jade, who was watching Sarah with glistening eyes. Governor Chen took the podium after the anthem, her voice carrying clearly through the packed lobby. "What we're witnessing here at Maple Hollow isn't just a hospital turnaround, it's a revolution in compassionate care," she gestured to the crowd. "This is a community that chose to see beyond rumors and fear. You chose to stand behind someone who had the courage to return to where she found healing, to create healing for others." The governor turned to face Jade directly. "Miss Freeman, your journey from patient to provider, from survivor to leader, embodies everything we aspire to in public service. Today, I'm proud to announce that Maple Hollow Hospital will receive $5 million in state funding as our first designated center of compassionate care excellence." Applause erupted through the lobby. Noah saw several of his nurses wiping away tears. The funding would secure the hospital's future for years to come. Furthermore, Governor Chen continued, lifting a blue velvet box from the podium. "It is my privilege to present Jade Freeman with the State Humanitarian Medal of Honor, our highest civilian recognition for service to community." Jade stepped forward, and the governor placed the medal around her neck. The golden disc caught the morning light streaming through the lobby windows. Noah could see Jade's hands trembling slightly as she accepted the honor. "I!" Jade's voice cracked as she approached the microphone. She took a deep breath. "I came to this town 7 years ago with nothing but a sick child and shame. What I found here was dignity. One person's kindness," she looked at Noah, "changed everything." The crowd grew silent, hanging on her words. "This medal doesn't belong to me alone. It belongs to every person who's ever needed a second chance, to every nurse who's worked an extra shift, to every doctor who's treated someone who couldn't pay." She touched the metal gently. "This is for all of us." Governor Chin then unveiled the official designation plaque that would hang in the lobby. Maple Hollow Hospital, State Center for Compassionate Care Excellence. The crowd erupted in cheers again. As the formal ceremony concluded, people began mingling and congratulating Jade. Local reporters pressed forward with questions, but Noah noticed Jade beginning to look overwhelmed. He recognized that look. It was the same one she'd had years ago in the ER, when everything felt like too much. He made his way to her side and quietly asked, "Need some air?" Jade nodded gratefully. Noah spoke briefly to the governor's aide, who helped create a path through the crowd. They slipped out through the side entrance into the crisp morning air. The crowd outside noticed them and began to cheer. Jade stood for a moment, the metal glinting against her blazer, snowflakes beginning to dust her shoulders. Noah watched as she took in the scene, the supportive signs, the smiling faces, the genuine acceptance she'd fought so hard to earn. Without thinking, Noah reached for her hand. Jade's fingers interlocked with his warm, despite the cold air. They stood there in silence as happy tears rolled down both their cheeks, the sound of applause washing over them like a blessing. The morning sun broke through the clouds, making the fresh snow sparkle. It was the same view Noah had stared at countless times through his office window during the hospital's darkest days. But now, standing hand in hand with Jade while their community celebrated around them, everything looked different. Everything looked possible. The autumn leaves danced across the hospital parking lot as Noah helped Sarah load the last box into her small used car. His heart felt both heavy and light, pride and sadness mixing together like watercolors. Sarah's violin case sat carefully in the passenger seat, a testament to countless hours of practice that had finally paid off. "Did you remember your warm coat?" Noah asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Chicago winters are brutal." Sarah rolled her eyes but smiled. "Dad, you've asked me that 3 times already." "Yes, I packed it." She wrapped her arms around him tightly. "I'm going to miss you so much." Noah held his daughter close, remembering the tiny girl who used to fall asleep during his late-night hospital shifts. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. Your mom would be too." "I know," Sarah whispered. She pulled back and wiped her eyes. "Promise you'll take care of yourself? And maybe let someone else take care of you too?" She glanced meaningfully toward the hospital entrance where Jade stood, giving them privacy for their goodbye. Noah felt his cheeks warm. "Sarah, Dad, I'm not blind. I see how you look at her." Sarah's smile was gentle. "It's okay to be happy again." After final hugs and promises to call often, Noah watched his daughter's taillights disappear down the street. He stood there long after she was gone, until a gentle hand touched his arm. "She's going to do amazing things," Jade said softly. Noah nodded, not trusting his voice just yet. Together they walked back into the hospital, their shoulders brushing. Over the next few weeks, their casual coffee breaks grew longer. Shared glances held more meaning. Their late-night planning sessions for hospital programs often drifted into personal conversations. One evening, after most of the staff had gone home, Noah found Jade in the renovated garden courtyard. She sat on a bench, her face tilted up to catch the last warm rays of sunset. "Is this seat taken?" he asked. She patted the space beside her. "I was hoping you'd find me here." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Noah spoke. "Sarah called earlier. She loves her classes, made some friends in the orchestra." "That's wonderful." Jade turned to face him. "And how are you doing?" "I miss her," Noah admitted. "But I'm proud, and—" He hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I'm learning there are other kinds of happiness too." Jade's hand found his, their fingers intertwining naturally. It wasn't their first touch, but it felt significant, an acknowledgement of what had been growing between them. The weeks turned to months. Their relationship developed slowly, carefully, both of them conscious of their public roles at the hospital. They kept things professional at work, but evenings often found them sharing quiet dinners or walking through town, talking about everything and nothing. Noah discovered Jade's secret sweet tooth and her habit of reading medical journals for fun. She learned about his collection of old vinyl records and his terrible attempts at baking. They shared deeper things too. Her nightmares about her past, his lingering grief over his wife's death, their shared passion for helping others. One crisp morning, Noah arrived at work to find Jade already in his office, surrounded by maps and papers. "What's all this?" he asked, hanging up his coat. Jade's eyes sparkled with excitement. "I've been analyzing healthcare access in the surrounding counties. Look at these gaps in coverage." She pointed to several marked areas on the map. Some people are driving over 2 hours to reach basic medical care. Noah leaned over the desk, immediately engaged. The rural clinics in these areas closed years ago. Budget cuts. Exactly. Jade shuffled through some papers. But what if we could change that? The hospital is stable now, doing well. We have resources, experience. Noah straightened up, an idea taking shape. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Satellite clinics, they said in unison. Small facilities, Noah continued, energized. Staffed with nurse practitioners, basic emergency services, connected to our main hospital through telemedicine, Jade added. We could provide training, support, preventive care programs, mental health services. They worked through lunch, sketching out plans and possibilities. The sun was setting when Noah finally sat back, running a hand through his hair. This would be a huge undertaking, he said, but it could help so many people. Jade reached across the desk and took his hand. That's what we do best, isn't it? Help people? Noah squeezed her hand, marveling at how this remarkable woman had transformed not just the hospital, but his life. We'd need to start small, maybe one clinic at first, prove the concept. I already have some ideas about funding, Jade said. And I know some healthcare tech companies that might partner with us for the telemedicine infrastructure. They spent the next hour outlining a preliminary proposal. Noah watched Jade as she made notes, her face animated with purpose. She caught him looking and smiled. What? Just thinking about how far we've come since that snowy night when you first walked in. Jade's expression softened. Who would have thought? Life has a way of surprising us. That it does. Noah picked up one of the maps. So, where should we start? Which community needs us most? They've been over the maps together, planning not just the future of healthcare in their region, but their shared future as well. The evening stretched on, filled with possibility and purpose, as they began mapping out their next chapter of helping others, together. The October morning dawned crisp and clear, painting the maple trees in brilliant shades of red and gold. Behind Maple Hollow Hospital, volunteers had transformed the healing garden into a small wedding venue. White chairs dotted the grass between flowering beds, and simple white ribbons decorated the natural arch where James Holloway waited, his carpenter's hands clasped nervously in front of him. Noah adjusted his tie in the mirror of the hospital's newly renovated guest suite, the same room where he'd first offered Jade shelter on that snowy night 2 years ago. Now, it served as her bridal room. He turned to find Jade standing there in a simple ivory dress, her dark hair swept up with tiny white flowers. You clean up pretty nice, Doc, she said with a small laugh, but her voice trembled slightly. Noah's throat tightened as he looked at her. You look beautiful, Jade. He paused, searching for the right words. You know, when you left that thank you note that morning, I never imagined we'd end up here. Jade smoothed her dress, her hands shaking. I was so scared that day, scared of everything. Of him finding us, of not being able to feed Tommy, of being judged. She met Noah's eyes in the mirror. But you just helped. No questions asked. You were the first person who treated me like a human being in so long. Noah crossed the room and took her hands in his. They were steady now, surgeons' hands that had helped countless patients, but at this moment, they offered a different kind of healing. You did all the hard work yourself, Jade. You built yourself back up. You created something amazing here. A knock at the door interrupted them. Sarah, home from her first semester at music school, poked her head in. Everyone's ready, she said with a bright smile. She looked grown up in her bridesmaid's dress, and Noah felt that familiar pride surge through him. Jade took a deep breath and squeezed Noah's hands. Will you really do this? Walk me down the aisle? It would be my honor, Noah replied, his voice rough with emotion. You're family now. You have been since that first night. The small gathering of guests stood as the string quartet, led by Sarah on violin, began to play. Noah offered his arm to Jade, and together they stepped out into the autumn sunshine. The path to the arch was lined with fallen maple leaves, creating a natural red and gold carpet. James's face lit up when he saw Jade, and Noah recognized the look of pure love and acceptance in the carpenter's eyes. James had spent months working on the hospital renovations, and Noah had watched their relationship bloom slowly and steadily, built on mutual respect and understanding. Tommy, now a healthy 4-year-old, stood proudly next to James as ring bearer, wearing a miniature version of the groom's suit. He beamed at his mother as she approached. When they reached the arch, Noah turned to Jade. Following tradition, the officiant asked, Who gives this woman to be married? Noah's voice was clear and strong as he answered, I do, as her first real family. He kissed Jade's cheek and placed her hand in James's before taking a seat in the front row next to Sarah. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. James and Jade had written their own vows, speaking of building new foundations and creating spaces of safety and love. When James promised to always be gentle with her heart, Jade's tears finally fell, and there wasn't a dry eye in the garden. At the small reception in the hospital's newly renovated cafeteria, Noah stood to give his toast. He looked around at the gathered guests, hospital staff who had supported their vision of compassionate care, community members who had stood by them during the darkest days, and new friends who had joined their extended family. He cleared his throat and raised his glass. 2 years ago, on a snowy night, much like the ones that will soon be here, a brave young woman walked into our ER with nothing but hope and desperation. Today, that same woman stands before us, but she's not the same person at all. Jade taught me something profound about redemption, that it's not just about being saved, but about rising up to save others. Noah paused, his eyes meeting Jade's across the room. I thought I was just doing my job that night, but Jade showed me that small acts of kindness can ripple out in ways we never expect. She came back to heal not just this hospital, but our entire community. She turned a place of last resort into a beacon of hope. He turned to James, who held Jade's hand tightly. And James, you're the perfect addition to our unexpected family. You build beautiful things with your hands, but more importantly, you build people up with your heart. The way you've supported Jade's vision, the gentle strength you bring to everything you do, it's exactly what this family needed. Noah raised his glass higher. To Jade and James, may your love continue to build bridges, heal hearts, and remind us all that second chances aren't just possible. They're the very essence of grace itself. The guests raised their glasses, and Sarah's violin began to play softly in the background. Jade stood and hugged Noah tightly, whispering, "Thank you for being my dad when I needed one most." James shook Noah's hand warmly, then pulled him into a surprising hug. "Thank you for saving her," he said quietly, "so she could save all of us." Noah watched as the newlyweds moved to the dance floor for their first dance. Tommy ran up and tugged at his sleeve, asking to be lifted up for a better view. As Noah held the boy, he thought about how a single act of kindness had grown into something so much bigger than himself. The hospital was thriving. Sarah was pursuing her dreams, and here was Jade, radiant with happiness, dancing in the arms of a good man who cherished her. The autumn sun slanted through the windows, casting a warm glow over the gathering. Noah looked around at the renovated space, remembering the dark days when he'd wondered if the hospital would survive. Now it was full of light, laughter, and love, a testament to the power of compassion and second chances. The first rays of dawn painted the eastern sky in soft brushstrokes of pink and gold as Dr. Noah Whitaker stood on the hospital rooftop, his weathered hands cradling the most precious gift he'd ever received. In his arms, his 3-month-old grandson, James, slept peacefully, wrapped snugly in a pale blue blanket that Sarah had knitted during the long winter evenings before his birth. The early morning air was crisp and clean, carrying the sweet scent of autumn leaves from the surrounding maple trees that had watched over this place for decades. Noah gently swayed back and forth, his body moving in the familiar rhythm that had soothed countless babies over the years. He hummed an old lullaby, the same melody he used to sing to Sarah when she was small and couldn't fall asleep during thunderstorms. The tune his late wife had sung countless times in their old house, her voice floating through the hallways like a prayer. The baby's warmth against his chest filled him with a profound sense of peace he hadn't felt in years, a wholeness that made his heart feel complete again. "Dad?" Sarah's voice came softly from behind him, tender and knowing. "I thought I'd find you up here." Noah turned slowly, careful not to disturb the sleeping bundle in his arms. His daughter stood silhouetted against the brightening sky, now 25, and radiant with the confidence that came from knowing her purpose in the world. The years had only enhanced her natural grace, and motherhood had given her a new kind of glow that reminded him so much of her mother it sometimes took his breath away. She wore her hospital volunteer badge pinned to her sweater. Even on vacation from her job in Chicago, she couldn't stay away from helping others. "Just showing little James the sunrise?" Noah replied, his voice thick with emotion as he gazed down at the tiny face. "Figured he should see where his Ferdinand grandfather spent most of his life, and I think he's gonna love music just like his mama. He already responds to humming." Sarah moved to stand beside him, her presence warm and comforting. She laid her head on his shoulder like she used to do as a teenager when the weight of losing her mother felt too heavy to bear alone. Remember when I used to practice violin up here? The acoustics were perfect because of how the building was shaped. And the nurses would crack open their windows to listen. Noah chuckled softly, the memory bringing a smile to his tired face. Mrs. Henderson from the cardiac unit used to say your music helped her patients heal faster. Some things never change. They still talk about those impromptu concerts you gave. Below them, the hospital was slowly coming to life in the gentle morning light. Cars began filling the newly expanded parking lot as the day shift arrived, their headlights cutting through the dawn mist. The Freeman Center's windows glowed warmly with golden light, a beacon of hope for those seeking shelter and healing from wounds both seen and unseen. 5 long years had transformed the once struggling facility into a thriving cornerstone of the community, its halls now buzzing with purpose and possibility. I can't believe how different everything looks from up here, Sarah mused, gesturing toward the renovated wings that stretched out like welcoming arms, and the new community health building that stood proudly where an empty lot used to be. The whole place feels alive now, but you're still the same, Dad. Still the first one here, last one to leave. Noah smiled, his eyes tracking a young doctor who hurried across the parking lot below, probably running late for rounds. She was one of many new hires who had come from across the country to learn about their unique approach to compassionate care. The hospital had become known for something special, a place where healing happened not just through medicine, but through genuine human connection. Someone has to keep an eye on things, he said quietly, though they both knew it went deeper than that. This place had been his sanctuary through the darkest times, and now it felt like home to an entire community. Little James stirred in his sleep, making tiny sounds that tugged at Noah's heart. He adjusted the soft blanket with practiced ease, his mind drifting to countless nights spent walking these very halls with Sarah when she was this small. Back then, he'd been a young father balancing medical school with midnight feedings and diaper changes. Now his daughter worked as a music therapist in Chicago, using her gift to heal others just as he'd always known she would, just as her mother would have wanted. Jade called yesterday from Portland, Sarah said, her voice filled with admiration. She's doing amazing work with the new clinic network. 3 more locations opening next month, each one designed to serve communities that have been forgotten by everyone else. She paused, looking at her father with the knowing expression she'd inherited from her mother. She still says it all started because of you, Dad, because of that night when you chose to help instead of turning away. Noah shook his head modestly, uncomfortable with praise as always. I just did what anyone would have done, what any decent person should do. No, Dad. Sarah's voice grew firm, the way it did when she needed him to really hear her. Not anyone would have helped a scared woman and her sick child on that snowy night, expecting nothing in return. Not everyone would have given their last dollar to keep hope alive in this place when the board wanted to shut it down. Not everyone would have fought as hard as you did. The morning light strengthened by degrees, washing over the town of Maple Hollow in shades of amber and rose. From this height, Noah could see the spire of the old Methodist church where he'd married Sarah's mother 30 years ago. He could see the town square where they now held quarterly community health fairs, bringing care directly to those who needed it most. And there was Murphy's Diner, where he'd once stood up for a stranger's dignity when no one else would. Each site held layers of memories, small kindnesses that had rippled outward through the years, touching countless lives in ways he was only beginning to understand. A gentle breeze stirred the autumn air, carrying with it the scent of wood smoke from someone's fireplace. James opened his eyes at the soft touch of wind on his face, revealing the same deep brown eyes as his mother. Eyes that seemed to hold wisdom far beyond his few months of life. The baby gazed up at his grandfather with complete trust, tiny fingers emerging from his blanket to curl around Noah's thumb with surprising strength. You know what Mom used to say? Sarah continued softly, her voice carrying the weight of cherished memory. She'd always tell me, the measure of a life is not in what we keep, but in what we give away. I never understood what she meant until I watched you live it every single day. Noah's eyes misted as his wife's words echoed in his heart. She would have loved this moment with every fiber of her being, seeing their daughter grown into a woman of purpose and compassion, successful and genuinely happy, seeing their grandson healthy and strong, surrounded by love, seeing the hospital not just surviving, but flourishing as a true haven of healing and hope for everyone who walked through its doors. The sun crested the horizon fully now, its warm light catching something metallic on the brick wall near the rooftop door. Sarah gently guided her father toward it, James still nestled securely in his arms. There, mounted at eye level on the weathered brick wall, was a bronze plaque he hadn't noticed before. Noah stepped closer, squinting slightly as he read the words etched into its polished surface. In honor of Dr. Noah Whitaker, for the man who gave freely when he had nothing left to give. Your compassion saved more than a hospital. It saved a community. Below these words was his full name, his years of service, and the date of that long-ago winter night when a desperate mother named Jade Freeman had walked through his emergency room doors with her sick child, changing everything. The entire staff had it made, Sarah explained, watching her father's face carefully as emotion played across his features. From the janitors to the chief of surgery, they all contributed money from their own pockets. It's their way of saying thank you for showing them what it really means to be healers. Noah stood in stunned silence, overwhelmed by the simple yet profound tribute. The weight of it settled over him like a warm embrace, not just the recognition, but the knowledge that his small choices had mattered to so many people. In his arms, James cooed softly, reaching toward the golden sunlight with tiny hands that seemed to grasp for the future itself. Below them, the morning shift change was happening with its usual quiet efficiency. Nurses hurried between buildings, doctors checked their phones for overnight updates, and support staff prepared for another day of serving their community. All of them carrying forward the legacy of compassion that had not only saved their hospital, but transformed it into something extraordinary. A place where healing happened, not despite financial struggles, but because of the deep human connections forged in the midst of them. The autumn breeze carried the distant sound of church bells, calling the faithful to morning worship. And Noah remembered something Jade had told him during one of her visits back to Maple Hollow. She'd been standing in almost this exact spot, looking out over the town that had given her hope when she'd had none left. Kindness is like a seed, she'd said, her voice filled with wonder at how far she'd come. Plant it anywhere, and something beautiful will grow. You planted so many seeds, Dr. Whitaker. Look what's growing now. Looking out over Maple Hollow in the strengthening daylight, Noah could see the truth of her words everywhere. The hospital stood as living proof that even in the darkest times, a single act of compassion could light the way forward, not just for one person, but for an entire community that learned to care for one another. The Freeman Center housed families starting over. The community health building offered free care to anyone who needed it. And somewhere in Portland, Jade was building more places of hope, carrying forward the lessons learned in this small hospital on the edge of a forgotten town. The morning sun warmed his weathered face as he held his grandson close, surrounded by the peaceful quiet of dawn and the deep satisfaction that came from a life well lived. Kindness, he knew now with absolute certainty, was never wasted. It was the most powerful medicine of all, capable of healing not just individual hearts, but entire communities, one small act of grace at a time. As James dozed peacefully in his arms and Sarah hummed the same lullaby their family had shared for generations, Noah felt his wife's presence in the gentle breeze and heard her voice in the morning bird song. Well done, my love. Well done. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Noah Whitaker, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.